Allow me to introduce myself. Who knows what dastardly crime might perpetrate next?
He's a very clever arch criminal who must be put away. Another innocent victim.
I don't know.
All right, peace and love, and of course the introduction never played it in the music because I forgot to pick the.
Allow me to introduce myself. Who knows what dastardly crime might perpetrate next?
He's a very clever arch criminal who must be put away. Another innocent victim.
I don't know.
All right, peace and love, peace and love to y'all. It's another orange day. Y'all know I love my orange. Represent New York all day, every day. Peace and love to y'all, man. Thanks for joining the show. Share the show with 10 people. But before I do go into this, I wanted to play one song.
Speak the truth, speak the truth. She need to understand this. Stop my campus. All you just talking. Never I do this here often. One of the biggest mistakes you ever could make is disrespecting the greatness. You may have never heard this before. One more for the playlist. Tell me what to do. Speak the truth, speak the truth. She need to understand this. Stop my campus. All you just talking. Never I do this here often. One of the biggest mistakes you ever could make is disrespecting the greatness. You may have never heard this before. One more for the playlist. Tell me what to do. Cool. Thanks. Kudos. Real talk, not for the pseudos. Trust the kid. Real talk. I debunked them. It exists still. Don't run from this. That's a wise man told me. Watch for the fakes and the phones. You gotta be cautious. Listen and open your conscience. People be talking that nonsense. Chattering. That's when the daggers are stopping. Okay. Speak the truth. Speak the truth. You need to understand this. Straight shot. I can't miss. All you just talking. Never. I do this here often. Biggest mistake you ever could make is disrespecting the greatness. You may have never heard this before. One more for the playlist. Tell me what to do. Speak the truth, speak the truth. You need to understand this. Straight shot, I can't miss. All you just talking. Never I do this here often. One of the biggest mistakes you ever could make is disrespecting the greatness. You may have never heard this before. One more for the playlist. Tell me what to do.
All right, peace and love, peace and love, peace and love, peace and love. This is your brother Golfby. We're going to get it in today. You know, it's funny how Christians were nitpicking everything Billy Carson said. But as soon as Wes Huff starts saying stuff and messing up, the Christians try to apologize and make it right because he's one of our team. He's one of the guys on our team. So let's make it right. And anybody want to jump on, by the way, too. And also, we're going to get into what's going on between. Oh, Lord Jamar is just gone. He believes in the 5% teachings, by the way, that teaches what is the circumference of the earth. So how are you following a teaching that said there's a circumference of the earth is 196,940,000 square miles, but you're now saying the earth is flat? That means his whole teachings need to be thrown out. The 5% teachings, the actual facts. That's how you address him. Address him with what he holds to. You see, this is why I tell you, man. But anyway, West Africa, boy, DNA, big up yourself. Anyway, we're gonna talk about the Umar Tariq stuff. Plus, we're gonna talk about Skip Bayless. For those who don't know Skip Bayless, he's the guy that used to be on ESPN when on Fox Sports. Now they're saying that he was trying to pay a woman 1.5 million to have sex with them. And of course, the Israelites versus the Christians. That's just something that we deal with every day. Christians trying to fight to say, hey, our religion is the right religion for the world. The Israelites are saying, we are the Israelites. We are black folks in America. We are the Israelites. I don't think anyone outside of those groups, the Israelite groups, believe that they're the Israelites, because trust me, it's just not factual. And although people hold to certain things, we gotta realize that there's other people that actually that has done the studies with what we believe in and hold to. All right. I need to change this PTR, by the way, too. I need to change my PTR. Oh my God, this PTR is fire. Oh my God, y'all gotta see this PTR that homeboy just made for me. This is fire. Pure fire. I gotta change it right away. Pardon me a second, family. I gotta edit the show because this PTR gotta go up right away, man. Right away. Shout out to my brother for doing that for me. Hey, Tete Usam Mayat Ra Seneferu. Peace and love to you, brother. Brother Law in the building. Uncode Barber Studios, Ricardo Robinson. Brother, are you going to review the Aunt versus Vocab Malone? I never knew they had a discussion. I never knew that. So you putting me on to something right here. Oh man, this guy is fly. Okay, no problem, bro. This fly, I got to put it up right away, man. I got to go to the edit. I got to edit this right away, family, and change my thumbnail. So this thumbnail is fire. Fire. Oh, man. This thumbnail is fire. Oh, okay. I got you. I'm not aware of that. Okay. All right. Hold on. I'm doing too many things at one time. Yeah, my brother just made this for me right here. Y'all got to check this out. For those who didn't see it yet, this is the avatar for today's show. It's fly as hell, man. Look at this right here. Oh, man. This is fly, family. Wouldn't y'all say? Isn't that fly? So that's the cover for today's show. I had to use an old one because my boy was sleeping. But this right here is straight fire. Straight fire right here. Y'all gotta, when you see this, you want to watch what the show is about. So I gotta make today a great show. I gotta make it a great show today. And today is gonna be a good show. I'm a teacher at heart. I'm a researcher at heart. I'm a debater at heart. But I want to say to everybody, we gotta be humble with what we hold to. And sometimes when we humble, you learn more and try to get into the mindset of how people think. There's not a Christian in the world that's going to say, you know what? My religion is wrong and you guys are right. But I'd rather know that I'm wrong and believe in this and go to heaven than be wrong and don't end up anywhere. Muslims, the same way. If you don't believe in Muhammad, you don't believe in Allah and his messenger, you will not enter into the hereafter. And Brother Allah would bear witness. If you're a Christian and you accept Allah as God and Muhammad as his messenger and accept Allah as God and take Shahada, you will go into the hereafter. You could be a Jew and say the hereafter under Islam. But if you don't accept Allah and his messenger, you don't have nowhere to go. The whole 70 virgin stuff is some stuff I think in the hadith that's not really true, but it sounds like a counteraction, because to be honest with you, ladies and gentlemen, Christianity has the best game in town for the last 2,000 years. Let's think about it. If you die, you have the potential to come back to life. That's all everybody want to do. Nobody wants to die. Everybody want to live forever. It's only when you get old, like 80 and 90, like, I don't need to live no more. I need to just get out of here. But everybody right now under 50 is like, yo, I want to live forever. There's not one person that don't want to live forever. Now, the truth of the matter is, how many people in the audience, how many people do you think die daily in the world? Because we're going to put it on the gods of the world. Anybody want to make a lucky guess? If you make the guess right now, I give you 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If you say the right answer, I give you $50 in your Cash App right now. You got 10 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Nobody want to enter? All right. How many people die? Occam's razor, right? Posterior thought. Yes. So with Buddhism, they have their own little reincarnation thing going in. Rex says 2 million. Let me put up Rex's answer right here. The question is, how many people die daily in the world? In the world. Because remember, God is the author of all things according to some people, how they believe. Do you believe that God is in control of the world, the universe, of humanity? How many human beings die daily in the world? I used to say 10,000 on my show that I used to do on club, what do you call it? Club Talk, what do you call it? I don't remember what it is. But anyway, I want y'all to look at this statistic right here. And this is going to blow your mind. Because remember, we all believe our religion is the right religion for everybody in the world. If I'm a Christian, that worked. Almost 180,000. Good guess. What's his name? That worked. Good guess. If you were to look at this statistic, you're not even going to believe what I'm reading right now. You're going to be like, oh, this is a lie. This don't make no sense. How many people die each day in 2024 according to World Population Review? 170,790 people. I used to teach that 10,000 a day on Blog Talk. It's way more. Look at China, 31,000. Let me make it bigger so people could see these statistics. Remember, God is above everything that happens. Why are these people dying in these countries every day? Are they sinning? Why? Are they dying of hunger? Are they killing each other? Why does God allow this to happen? This is God is the author of all things. Okay, China, you're not a Christian culture. So you're not a Muslim culture. Look at India. You're following Hinduism and Buddhism and all those Eastern religions. It can't help you. 26,000 dying daily. Look at America. 8,341 people die per day in the United States of America. Nigeria, 7,400. Indonesia, Russia, Pakistan, all these countries. Well, let's go to the Christian countries. What about Germany? 2,850. What about the United Kingdom? 1,836. What about Italy, where the Pope is? 1,819 people. What are they doing that so many people are dying daily? Whether it's war in Ukraine, we got Ukraine here, Spain, another so-called Christian country, Poland. Let me see where else. These are all the people that are dying daily. As a matter of fact, less people die in Afghanistan than in the United States daily. 8,000 people die daily in the United States of America. Look at all of these people. Who's responsible for this? Is it the evils that they're doing? They're not following the right God. It looked like China ain't following the right God for 31,000 people that die daily. Who is not dying? Who has zero? This is what we need to find. We need to find a country that has zero. Look at this. 2 people die daily in Monaco. 1 person die in St. Martin daily. Look at this. Cook's Island, 0. We found 0. Vatican City. Must be because it's Vatican City. Oh man, yo, it's amazing. So many people are dying all over the world daily. I don't mean to make a mockery or laugh of it. 170,000 people. Does it sound real to you? 170,000 people? 170,000 people? Wow. That's crazy. That's oh man, that is whoo. This is amazing. Who is responsible for this? Are they not following the right religion? What's going on? What's up? What's up, Unc? You have all these people making, I mean, I know somebody probably Googled them, I guess. But look at this family. 7,000 people are dying per hour. 119 people per minute. At 1.98 per second. What is going on, family? We arguing every day. I got the right religion. I'm following God. What God? Let's take a look at this. Here's something else I want to bring up. This is from a Wikipedia article, a list of religions and spiritual traditions. So you have the Eastern religions, right? So you have the Chinese philosophy schools. Look at all these different schools of thought they have in China. Maybe that's why so many people are dying there, right? Let's blame their religion. Confucianism. So Confucianism, let's click on Confucianism for a little bit. Also known as Ruism, is a system of thought and behavior originating in ancient China and is variously described as a tradition, philosophy, religion, theory of government, or way of life. Confucianism developed from teachings of the Chinese. Okay, let's scroll down a little bit. What about Taoism? Is a diverse philosophical and religious tradition indigenous to China, emphasizing harmony with Tao, with a range of meaning in Chinese philosophy. Translations of Tao include way, road, path, or technique, generally understood in Tao. Oh, so that's Taoism. Then you have the Indian religions. The four world religions that originated in the Indian subcontinent, also known as Dharmic religions, namely Hinduism, Jainism, Sikhism, and Buddhism. What is Buddhism, for those who don't know? Is an Indian religion and philosophical tradition based on teachings attributed to the Buddha, a wandering teacher who lived in the 6th or 5th century BC. It is the world's 4th largest religion with over 520 million followers. Wow. Let's click on Buddhism for a little bit. Let's see if we can take a look at this and see what we can learn about Buddhism. Why shouldn't black people in America become Buddhists? Why? Why shouldn't they? Why shouldn't we follow Buddhism? Over half a billion people follow it. It seems like also known as it's an Indian religion, with over 5 known as Buddhists who comprise 7% of the global population. Okay, according to tradition, Buddha instructed his followers in a path of development which leads to awakening and full liberation from dukkha, suffering or unease. So now, ladies and gentlemen, key words which leads to, according to tradition, the Buddha instructed his followers in a path of development which leads to what? Awakening. Isn't the black folks in America trying to be awakening? Don't they want full liberation from dukkha, aka you'd call the slave master the white man? And don't you want to remove yourself from suffering or unease? That's what we're looking for, right? So why don't we become Buddhists? He regarded this path as a middle way between extremes such as asceticism or sensual indulgence, teaching that dukkha arises alongside attachment or clinging. The Buddha advised meditation practices and ethical precepts rooting in non-harming. So this is what Buddhism is all about. Very interesting. Why don't we become Buddhists? Isn't that what Phil Jackson became this guy? Hey, James Carvers, why don't you watch first before you make the ludicrous comments that you normally make? Just watch first. Why don't we become Buddhists? It seems like an interesting religion. They have a guy, you know, like a Jesus type guy, Buddha. Why don't we follow this? Oh, you know why? Because we weren't colonized by the Eastern world. If we were colonized by the Eastern world, we would have probably been a Buddhist, following Hinduism, Taoism, or something to that effect. Or Jainism, which is another cool religion. But let's take a look at this some more. Buddhism. So we know what Buddhism is about. Let's go back to the schools of thought again. Let's go back now. Scroll down. So they have different forms of Buddhism that people follow. They go deeper and deeper. Then you have Hinduism. Let's take a look at the Hindu philosophy. The Sanskrit and all this stuff and all these writings. Let me see, what is it about? Oh, they have different schools of thoughts. The existence of free will. I deny the existence of free will. I feel like, okay. They mixed up with all type of stuff. All right, Hinduism. Hinduism is Hinduism. All right. All right, so let's go back down. Hold on, let me scroll up a little bit. Let me see if I could catch what they said about Hinduism. All right, okay, Hinduism, here we go. It's an umbrella term for a range of Indian religious and spiritual traditions that are unified by adherence to the concept of Dharma, a cosmic order maintained by its followers through rituals and righteous living. As first expounded in the Vedas, the word Hindu is an exonym. And while Hinduism has been called the oldest religion in the world, it has also been described by the modern term Sanatana Dharma, emphasizing its eternal nature. Hinduism entails diverse systems of thought marked by a range of shared concepts that discuss theology, mythology, among other topics in textual sources. Hindu texts have been classified into Shrito and Smrito. The major Hindu scriptures are the Vedas, ethics and proper goals of the human being. Okay. So pretty much, you know, living a right, correct way and whatever. So you have Hinduism. Let's move down further a little bit now. Let's go down to Jainism. So you have Jainism, Sikhism, not interested, more Eastern religions. Then you have the Abrahamic religions, Christianity. Then you have Eastern Christianity. You have Eastern Orthodox, Oriental Orthodox, Western Christianity. All right. Roman Catholicism, syncretic. Then you have Islam, Shia Islam. You have different type of Islam, Sufism, syncretic. Then you have Judaism. Then you have Manichaeism, the Iranian religion, Zoroastrianism. Oh man, why don't we become Zoroastrianism? Why don't we follow these religions? They have a God that's all-wise, uncreated, benevolent, known as Ahura Mazda, who's hailed as the supreme being of the universe, opposed to Ahura as an Angra Manu, who is the personified as a destructive spirit. You know, it's amazing. All these religions exist in the world, and we still have problems. And we still got problems. We still got problems. All these religions in the world. I'm saying to everybody, look at the book of Nefesh. He said Rastafari is the only way. Everybody's religion is the right religion. So who is wrong? How do you determine who's right and who's wrong? In this Wes Huff, Billy Carson thing, a lot of people support Billy Carson based on the fact that he talks about supernatural stuff like Anunnaki. He talks about aliens coming from other planets, stuff on Mars, the supernatural stuff. The human mind likes to go into these areas. We love that. We are attracted. Even if you're a Christian, you'd like Billy Carson. You would, until you start talking about your religion. It's facts. So I'm saying to everybody, when is your religion the wrong religion? When can you falsify your religion? It's just like we arguing if Jesus resurrected from the dead, which is going to come up. What are we doing? I think, this is what I think. This is just me. I think there's enough rules and regulations within the church, within the synagogue, within the temples, within the Zoroastrian movement, within the Hindu movement, the Buddhism movement, the Taoism movement, the Confucianist movement, within all these religious movements, there's enough rules and laws for us as a human being to make up your own rules and laws you should live by. The pressure of being guilty, like, yo, I had to I like to run around and bash police cars in the back and destroy the light. And that's a crime. But I have a fetish to do that all the time. I love to run around and bash police cars when in the parking lot of the police station. People have some weird fetishes and weird things that they do. But in religion, you're drawn into a guilt to say, let me join this. Islam, you're joined this because you are promised something. You see, it's the promise that's keeping you involved in these religions. There's no reason why you can't study world religion and say, listen, man, I'm not going to steal. And I want my children to learn this. But then they should form their own way, how they structure, how they want to live. Folkways, their mores, their norms, their tradition, their customs, the way how you live. Even in African cultures, you got the personhood. You have the rites of passage. You have different things to teach you what's good or bad. People act like African systems don't have no rules. That's because we don't have nothing right now, like in the Ten Commandments. We have it written in our minds in Africa. In the Akan culture, you have the personhood, how you should walk, how you should live, how you should treat your brothers, your fellow man, your fellow human being, how you should treat your children, the rules and laws, how to eat, how to live, how to progress in life, how to make your children be a legacy of what you built. All of this is in African systems. It's also in Christianity. It's also in Judaism, in Proverbs. It's the way how to live and structure different things, monetary wise, all that stuff. You go to Proverbs, it teaches you this. The Bible has a structure. So does African systems. So does Eastern religions. Who determines if it's the right one? It's who colonized you. Let me say that again. It's who colonized you. So if you're in Africa today, you're enjoying Christianity because it's popularizing all over the continent of Africa right now. These missionaries, they're bringing food, clothes, and all that stuff to help you with basic needs of your life, and they also bring you that Bible. Here you go. I got a book for you. Everywhere you go, I got a book. Here's your book. And this book is going to help you to reach where you reach. Because the person who is bringing you aid, you look at them as superior. They just so happen to sometimes be a lighter person or a European, and you look at them as being righteous. So you want to join what they join. That's how we converted, the Berbers converted to Judaism. They converted to Islam because the Muslims was running stuff. Then the Jews came and started running the trade routes, monetary wise. They say, oh, we're going to be Jews. The Christians come about, they say, oh, we're going to be Christians. The Berbers would be anybody. Whoever is the right joint, whoever is pushing the right thing at the right time, monetary wise, we going to rock with them. We going to rock with the Christians. We going to rock with the Muslims. We going to rock with the Jews. It has to do with power and money. Your religious teachings that you hold to, the only reason why you hold on to it is because it's a part of the main part of the structure of your culture. All the things that you do is based off of that Christian, Judo-Christian societal culture. That's the only reason why you're that. No other reason. It doesn't make it the right religion, though. It's the right religion to you. It's what makes you feel comfortable. You like that conversation. I could pray to Jesus and wash all my sins away. It's so easy. And I'm promised life in heaven for the rest of my life. I'm promised. But what if the promise is just a joke? What if it's not real? How do you know it's real? How do you determine it's real? When all you're depending on is blind faith. All right. But anyway, all right. So let me get into this video right here. To start the show off. There's a video by Paul Logia, and there's another video that goes into the details very well. And I thought this video broke it down very well. If anybody want to jump on, let's get into this. Wes Huff is no better than Billy Carson when it comes to divvying out information. Nobody's perfect. And I think what we're looking for, Christianity likes someone who can defend them on a wide level. And I think this is what's going on here with this whole back and forth with Billy Carson. Billy Carson is a human being. And what happened is the only issues I have with Billy Carson is that we're turning Billy Carson or listening to him like a religion. It's becoming like a religion. Let's listen to some of the errors that he made.
On Joe Rogan to talk about the Bible, and so, of course, I had to make a response. We begin with a claim about the book of Isaiah. For a long time, our earliest copy of the book of Isaiah dated to the Middle Ages, so it was difficult to know if it had been accurately preserved or changed over the thousands of years since it was written. But then we discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls, a set of ancient manuscripts found in Qumran dating to around 2,000 years ago. And amazingly, within them, we found a complete copy of the book of Isaiah, 1,000 years older than the oldest one that we had until then. Take a listen.
So when you say the book of Isaiah is intact, how similar is it to the book of Isaiah that's in the Bible?
So that one is fascinating. So this isn't true for all of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but when we discovered the Great Isaiah Scroll, previous to that, the earliest copy of Isaiah that we had was in the Masoretic text, which is in the Middle Ages.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it was literally 1,000 years. We literally pushed back our understanding of Isaiah 1,000 years. And the thing that really shocked scholars, like I said, this isn't true for all of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but one of the things that shocked them about Isaiah was that it was word for word identical to the Masoretic text.
Word for word.
Word for word.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that would be amazing if it were true. In fact, the Dead Sea version of the Isaiah scroll is not quite identical to the Masoretic text, that is, the one that we know from the Bible. Can you guess how many textual variants there are between the two? Take a guess. 1 that Wes forgot about? 10? 100? Try more than 2,600. Yeah. Now, most of these variants are small. They're differences in spelling, for example, but some of them are more significant. For instance, in Isaiah chapter 2, the end of verse 9 and all of verse 10 are simply missing from the Dead Sea version. They're just not there, which tells us that they were a later addition. Here are some words from the Digital Dead Sea Scrolls project by the Israel Museum, which houses the Isaiah scroll. The text of the Great Isaiah scroll generally confirms the Masoretic or traditional version codified in medieval codices, all 66 chapters of the Hebrew version in the same conventional order. At the same time, however, the 2,000-year-old scroll contains alternative spellings, scribal errors, corrections, and most fundamentally, many variant readings. Strictly speaking, the number of textual variants is well over 2,600, ranging from a single letter, sometimes one or more words, to complete variant verse or verses. Well over 2,600. Again, many of these variants are minor, but Wes Huff told Joe Rogan that the scroll is word for word identical with the Masoretic text.
It was word for word identical to the Masoretic text.
Word for word.
Word for word.
Which is simply not true. Okay, moving on to the New Testament.
Was it the book of Isaiah?
Yeah.
That the same book is.
Now, let me ask anybody, if Billy Carson had made that error, right? Would we be condemning Billy Carson right now? Would we call Billy Carson a liar? Would we be blasting Billy Carson right now? This is my whole thing with the hypocrisy with Christians. I want to see one of them make the same video and pointing these errors out. Be like, nah, you should have known better than that, Wes. You're a guy who's you're a PhD student, so you're actually, and this is your field, manuscripts. So you should be repeating stuff that's known from what you're learning currently or in your PhD status, whatever you're studying as far as manuscripts. You should be on point, rolling it off. But anyway, let's check out some more stuff that he said.
Is exactly the same as, like, that's a miracle.
Yeah.
That's pretty fucking crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy.
If you just imagine the sheer number of illiterate people, the sheer number of days that have to go by where people are telling the story exactly the same, and that it's entrusted in the hands of these very few people that are so dedicated to it that they get the exact words right 1,000 years later, pretty bananas.
Well, I mean, that is kind of the crazy thing about Christianity, where you have this Jewish itinerant guy who's walking around first century Roman occupied Judea. He's making some pretty audacious claims to be God himself. And then he predicts his own death and resurrection. And then his disciples they think it's over. Like, they're like, he's dead. We're done.
Yeah.
And then they go from 11, scared men, because Judas commits suicide, scared men in an upper room, to completely overhauling the Roman world in only a couple hundred years, because of this claim that they say they saw Jesus resurrected. Like, there's something different that goes on there, that they're like, this is a miracle, right? Dead people don't usually rise from the dead.
There was quite a lot there. First, Wes says that Jesus was audaciously going around claiming to be God himself. I don't think that's true. Nowhere in Mark, Matthew, or Luke does Jesus actually claim to be God in his own words. At best, it's just in John's gospel that divine claims begin to appear. I and the Father are one. Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. Before Abraham was, ego eimi. I actually still don't think even these count, and we'll explain why in another video, but let's just say that they do. Even if this was Jesus explicitly claiming to be God, don't you think it's a bit suspicious that these claims only show up in our latest gospel? If Jesus was known to be walking around claiming explicitly to be God himself, did the other 3 gospel authors just not think this was relevant? A minor, unimportant detail not worth including? Come on. Anyway, Wes also mentioned how it was amazing that the early church grew from 11 scared disciples to overhauling the Roman world. On this, the sociologist Rodney Stark estimates that in its first 300 years, Christianity grew at a rate of 40% per decade, from a small group in the 1st century to 3 million in the 4th century. That sounds pretty impressive, until you learn that this is the same growth rate experienced by Mormonism since its foundation in the 19th century. So if the rate of Christianity's growth is good evidence of its truth, Mormonism just became a whole lot more plausible. By the way, we actually have 11 eyewitnesses to the Mormon golden plates, whose names and written testimonies we still have today. 3 of those witnesses say that they saw the angel Moroni give Joseph Smith the plates with their own eyes. And even when they fell out with Joseph Smith and left the church, they still continued to assert that they had witnessed these events.
Now, for anyone who's in Christianity, right? The only witnesses that we know of with Jesus' resurrection, right, physically, is when Paul says there was 500. We're going to get to the whole 4. He made a big error saying it's 400. Watch this. Now, when Jesus rose from the dead, according to what Paul said, there were 500 witnesses. Give me a name for one of them. You don't know none of them. It's just him writing that. We know Peter made a claim, right? All right. Now watch this. When Joseph Smith said the angel Moroni visited him, you have over 11 witnesses who testified that they saw this. Now what this gentleman is talking about is that when they left the Mormon church, left Joseph Smith, they still testified to it. So then now our enemies are against Joseph Smith, and they still said they saw the angel Moroni giving him the gold plates. Should we believe those people? You have people in the 1st century who resurrected and people said they saw them. Should we also believe those people? This is an interesting conversation to say, hey, Wes Huff is defending this, but what are we really doing here? Are we trying to really convince people? Are we really trying to convince people that somebody lived 2,000 years ago, died, and he rose from the dead and then ascended into heaven? Are we saying that in 2,000 years later? Are we still waiting for this guy? I tell y'all, Christianity has the best game in town. You have 4 billion people that literally believe this. They really believe this. They don't understand literature. Back then, a lot of people rose from the dead. A lot of people ascended into heaven, whether they were real people or humans. They're being attributed to this. It's a part of the motif. Come on. What are we doing here? Let's go. Let's get some more. Let's rewind a little bit to what he just said.
Growth rate experienced by Mormonism since its foundation in the 19th century. So if the rate of Christianity's growth is good evidence of its truth, Mormonism just became a whole lot more plausible. By the way, we actually have 11 eyewitnesses to the Mormon golden plates, whose names and written testimonies we still have today. 3 of those witnesses say that they saw the angel Moroni give Joseph Smith the plates with their own eyes. And even when they fell out with Joseph Smith and left the church, they still continued to assert that they had witnessed these events. We don't have anything like this kind of extant written testimony for the resurrection of Jesus, which we're about to get onto. But I just thought it was worth a mention.
It's very difficult for anybody who thinks of themselves as an intelligent person who's secular to even entertain the possibility that someone died and come back to life.
And I get that. But we've already talked about the fact that we don't think that the only thing that exists is matter and motion. We as in
Right.
you and I, right?
Right.
Like we believe that there's something else going on in this world that's a little bit crazy.
There's something else.
And
yeah.
and that to, I think, exclude that, I think excludes something that you're kind of putting blinders on
Yeah.
for. And you do have, I mean, you're right in terms of all of these ancient conventions and the ways that things were spread around. But the Gospels are written in the lifetime of the eyewitnesses. And they're written in this period of time where you have groups of individuals who could have fact-checked those things.
Okay, it gets a bit speculative here. Scholarly consensus is that the earliest gospel, Mark, was written around 70 AD. This is some 40 years after Jesus died, and likely after the death of most of the eyewitnesses, given life expectancy in the ancient world. But even if it were written earlier, even if it were written by Mark himself, we're talking about the resurrection here. And notice that the earliest version of Mark's gospel does not contain any descriptions of post-resurrection appearances. It ends with the empty tomb and a disappeared Jesus and suggests that he will appear to people, but it doesn't record those appearances. So even if it's written by an eyewitness, it doesn't report anything about the resurrected Jesus. The most numerous and detailed post-resurrection appearances of Jesus are in the 4th gospel, the Gospel of John. Scholarly consensus states this to somewhere between 90 and 100 AD. Wes Huff suggests an earlier dating based on an ancient fragment of the Gospel of John called P52. Here's what he says.
So you were talking about like what is our oldest manuscript evidence? So this guy is P52. John Ryland's 457. So that's a genuine Egyptian papyri that I made. I cut it out for you, and then I transcribed the text on that manuscript. So when we're talking about what is potentially our oldest evidence for the New Testament, this manuscript that most likely comes from Oxyrhynchus, Egypt, is the one that usually is universally accepted as our oldest one, and that contains John 18. Where Jesus is on trial before Pilate. And yeah, so that's the one. It's in the John Rylands Library in Manchester, England. The reason I bring this up is because before this was discovered by C.H. Roberts in the 1940s, the convention was, because of a guy named C.H. Bauer, that the Gospel of John was 2nd century. C.H. Roberts is, literally going through these piles of manuscripts in these drawers that are being like stashed away. And he finds this guy and he sees that it's written on both sides, which is almost exclusively a Christian convention. Because in the ancient world, they used scrolls. And the Christians, for reasons we're not entirely clear on, they start to make codices, books. And so they write on both sides. And so he says, okay, this is written on both sides. It's probably a Christian manuscript. So he sends it off to the leading paleographers, or guys who date manuscripts. And they all say, this is the beginning of the 2nd century. And so there's still debate about the dating of this, but the unanimous consensus is that it's comfortably 2nd century, potentially the beginning of the 2nd century, which means that this is found in Egypt. John is probably writing his gospel in Ephesus. So it has to be written by John, spread around, find its way to Egypt, be copied, and then end up in this manuscript, which means that at minimum, you've already pushed the Gospel of John back into the 1st century comfortably. And potentially even like most likely into the lifetime of the eyewitnesses of these events. And so all of the literature up until that point from the scholarly consensus about the dating of the Gospel of John gets totally rewritten.
Wow.
He correctly points out that there is dispute in the dating here. But notice that while Wes places P52 in the 2nd century,
it's comfortably 2nd century.
He pushes John's Gospel itself at minimum and comfortably back into the 1st century.
Which means that at minimum, you've already pushed the Gospel of John back into the 1st century comfortably.
Why? Well, because of the time it would take after John wrote the gospel in Ephesus for it to travel to Egypt and be copied.
Written by John, spread around, find its way to Egypt, be copied, and then end up in this manuscript.
A few problems with this. First, Wes assumes that the fourth gospel really was written by John the Apostle in Ephesus. This is, to say the least, heavily contested by New Testament scholars. But even so, Egypt just isn't all that far away from Ephesus, reachable in a few weeks for an ancient traveler, maybe a bit longer. Originally, P52 was thought to date between 100 and 150 AD. Split the difference at 125. Even if this early dating is correct, that still gives us 25 years for the gospel to have traveled from Ephesus to Egypt and still have been written within the 2nd century. But of course, even this dating is disputed. In 2012, Professor of Early Christianity Brent Nongbury wrote a paper in the Harvard Theological Review dispelling this very use of P52 to date the Gospel of John, called The Use and Abuse of P52. Here's what he says. What I have done is to show that any serious consideration of the window of possible dates for P52 must include dates in the later 2nd and early 3rd centuries. Thus, P52 cannot be used as evidence to silence other debates about the existence or non-existence of the Gospel of John in the first half of the 2nd century. The John Rylands Library itself, the library in Manchester which holds P52, says that recent research points to a date nearer to 200 AD. This would give the Gospel a century to travel to Egypt and still have been written in the 2nd century. But Wes Huff thinks, based on his confidence that P52 is from the 2nd century, that we can, again, at minimum and comfortably place the Gospel of John in the 1st century. Once again, as with the Isaiah scroll, I think he's just speaking way too confidently. And to be clear, I'm not claiming that John was written late. For all I know, it could have been written the day after Jesus ascended. The point is that the authorship of the Gospels is a hotly contested issue. What Wes Huff is leaving out is just how absolutely disputed almost everything he's saying is. I also want to mention here something that Wes talks about much later. There are dozens of non-canonical gospels that were written but didn't make it into the New Testament for all kinds of different reasons. Listen to what Wes Huff has to say about these gospels.
And so these books that were not included, are any of them interesting? I mean,
They're all interesting.
But does any of it seem like it belongs in the New Testament?
Well, so part of the problem with some of these other books is they appear to be almost completely reliant on the other books. So you do have, and some of them have an agenda to them.
Like, what? I'm just going to underline that. He just said of the non-canonical gospels.
Part of the problem with some of these other books is they appear to be almost completely reliant on the other books.
The problem here is with basically the first thing that anybody learns about the New Testament. Scholars think that Mark was written first, then Matthew and Luke were written later. Why? Because Matthew and Luke are reliant on Mark. And not just a little bit. More than 90% of Mark's gospel is also in Matthew's gospel. Mark has 660 verses in total. Over 600 of them are also in Matthew, often copied verbatim. It is undisputed that there is a literary dependence between Matthew and Luke and Mark. And almost everyone agrees that it's Matthew and Luke relying on Mark. I genuinely think I must have just misunderstood Wes here, because if heavily relying on an earlier gospel is reason to suspect it, then this would completely undermine the Gospels of Matthew and Luke. He also says that another problem with these non-canonical Gospels is that some of them appear to have an agenda.
And some of them have an agenda to them.
But one of the most discussed topics in New Testament scholarship is the agendas of the canonical Gospels. Matthew's presentation of Jesus as the fulfillment of Jewish prophecy, Luke's concern for the poor and the marginalized. John's gospel seems to contain polemical material, such as strongly emphasizing that John the Baptist is not the Messiah, probably because there were people around at the time who believed that he was. So when Wes Huff says,
part of the problem with some of these other books is they appear to be almost completely reliant on the other books. So you do have, and some of them have an agenda to them.
He's just told us that he's got a problem with the New Testament. Okay, moving on. After mentioning the Gospels, Wes goes on to talk about Paul. Whenever the Gospels were written, and by whomever, we know that Paul is the earliest source of the New Testament, dating squarely from the middle of the 1st century. And we think that he actually did write at least 7 of the letters attributed to him. And so it's to him that we now turn.
So
how do you fact check someone coming back from the dead?
Well,
how many people saw his body, right?
Well, Paul says that 400 people saw him all at once.
400 people saw the crucifixion.
No. Saw the resurrected Jesus. Yeah. First Corinthians 15, Paul says that Jesus appeared to the disciples and then he appeared to 400 people all at once.
Wes gets this slightly wrong, as Paul actually says that Jesus appeared to 500, not 400 people at one time. But this only makes it all the
Boy, if that was Billy Carson, they would have, oh, wow, oh, wow. Now, I see some folks putting in the Quran and Jew 72 saying it's written 500 years later. Well, if you look in the 2nd century, early 2nd century, there's a tradition that Jesus didn't die. It was Simon that died. Because Simon is the one that's carrying the cross in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. In John, Jesus carries the cross. The person who carried the cross is the one that got killed. But that's another story for another time. Simon of Cyrene was the one that was supposedly told by Basilides wrote that he was the one that was killed instead of Jesus. That's where the Quran got its tradition from. So there's a tradition that Jesus didn't die near the gospel time period. All right, but anyway, let's talk about it. Let's go back to Billy Carson. If Billy Carson had made this error, look at what this guy says. Paul had 500 witnesses. Every Christian said, "Oh my God, he made an error. It's off by 100." Okay, I'm saying this to everybody. If it was Billy Carson, what would your response be? You'd be going in on him because you are a part of the Christian persuasion. It's just a simple error to me. But if Billy Carson had did it, it would have been blown out of proportion. Oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But this guy's making errors about word for word, 500 witnesses, giving incorrect history on Christianity, period. I'm not saying he's lying, but let's let's picture if it was Billy Carson doing it.
more amazing. 500 people.
Jesus. Yeah. 1 Corinthians 15, Paul says that Jesus appeared to the disciples and then he appeared to 400 people all at once.
Wes gets this slightly wrong, as Paul actually says that Jesus appeared to 500, not 400 people at one time. But this only makes it all the more amazing. 500 people witnessing the physically resurrected Jesus would be an amazing proof of his resurrection. Unfortunately, 1 Corinthians chapter 15 is the only mention we have of this event anywhere. It's not in the Gospels, nor in Acts, nor in any other historical source. So, what do we learn about this event from 1 Corinthians? Nothing. Nothing at all. Paul does write that, quote, he appeared to more than 500 brothers at one time, but that's it. We're not told who these people are, or why they were gathered, or when this occurred, or how Paul learned about it, or how he knows the number of people involved. Paul himself wasn't there. Is this just something that he heard about? From whom? When? We're not told anything about this extraordinary event. And also, even if Jesus did appear to 500 people, how many of them actually believed what they saw? Again, we're not told. Maybe there was an appearance, but only some of them believed it. Remember, Matthew's gospel tells us that even when Jesus appeared right in front of his 11 disciples, some of them doubted. They'd lived with Jesus, and he was standing right in front of them, but they didn't believe. Many people ask me, why would the disciples have believed in the risen Christ if they didn't actually see him? In response, I point to this verse in Matthew and ask the reverse. How could the disciples have seen him and then not believed? With the 500, we're not told how many of them believed that they saw Jesus. If some of the disciples doubted that it was him, why would we trust an unnamed mass of strangers mentioned briefly in one source by a man who wasn't there but heard that they'd seen him? And even if all of the 500 people did believe that it was Jesus, how would Paul know this? Even if he was there, which he wasn't, did he interview them? Was there a show of hands for anyone who doubted before the crowd dispersed? There was no easy way even for Paul to know what these people believed, which makes it impossible for us to know what they believed. And even if the 500 people did all believe it was Jesus, how many of them were already predisposed to think this? Remember, sometimes groups do claim to see visions, such as various apparitions of Mary, or the Roman Emperor Constantine's vision of a cross of light in the sky, which may have been seen by his whole army as well. The source isn't clear. Look at this image. This is a picture of a crowd in Fatima, Portugal in 1917. This crowd, many more than 500 in number, were witness to the so-called miracle of the sun. A prophecy by 3 shepherd children said that the Virgin Mary would perform a miracle on the 13th of October, causing this large crowd to gather on that day. And the miracle happened. Testimonies from the members in the crowd were published in the newspaper. They claimed to have seen the sun dancing in the sky, zigzagging around, and even advancing towards the earth, all for 10 minutes. So a large crowd witnessing a prophesied miracle, and we actually know who saw it and precisely what they saw. We even have their direct testimony. Does Wes Huff believe in this Catholic miracle? Do you? And if not, why not? But Alex, how do you explain this then? If it didn't actually happen, why would there even be this rumor of 500 people seeing Jesus? Well, I'm glad you asked. I want to share an idea that I learned from the Christian biblical scholar Dale Allison in his glorious book on the resurrection of Jesus. Think about this for a moment. How could, quote, more than 500 people all see the man Jesus, quote, at one time? That's a pretty large group of people. How closely could they have examined him? How could they all have got a good view at one time? Imagine a celebrity like Justin Bieber being surrounded by 500 people in the street. How well would you be able to make him out? Could you even be certain that it was him? Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's take a look at what Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, but in the original Greek in which Paul was writing. Here's Paul talking about the appearances. He appeared to Cephas, that's Peter, and then to the 12, then he appeared to the 500. But notice that in between the words appeared and 500, we have this word, excuse my pronunciation, epano. This word is typically translated here as more than. Hence, Jesus appeared to more than 500 brothers. But let's investigate this word epano. Every other time it appears in the New Testament, it's translated differently. The word epano means not more than, but over or above or upon. The only place in the whole New Testament where this word is translated to mean more than is, you guessed it, 1 Corinthians chapter 15. That's why, by the way, interestingly, if you look at the King James version of this verse, you'll read the following. After that, he was seen of above 500 brethren at once. Above. It's interesting, right? So looking at the Greek, it seems plausible that Jesus did not appear to more than 500 people, but rather he appeared above 500 people. Yes, above. Do you see what I'm getting at? It was a vision in the sky, just like the sun miracle above Fatima or the cross of light above Constantine's army. It happened above the crowd. Now, of course, that word, epano, does appear here before a number, 500. So it could well mean over or above 500, as in more than 500. But then again, in Luke chapter 19, during the parable of the 10 minas, Jesus has a man say to one of his servants, "Take charge of 10 cities," and to his other servant, "You take charge of 5 cities." If you read the English Standard Version, the translation is, "You shall have authority over 10 cities," or "You are to be over 5 cities. Why? Well, because the word there is, you guessed it, epano, over. So even in front of a number, this can still mean over rather than more than. And even without this linguistic evidence, what do you think is the most likely explanation for a group of 500 people all seeing Jesus at one time? Especially considering Paul's own conversion on the road to Damascus. Christians say that this involved him meeting the risen Christ, but Acts tells us that he simply saw a flash of light and heard a voice. That was it. That was the nature of Paul's meeting with Jesus, a flash of light. Was the appearance to the 500 of a similar form? We simply do not know. Whatever we believe about this strange verse, it's hardly evidence enough to balance the resurrection upon. Here are the words of Dale Allison on this appearance to the 500 in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. It is little more than a tease, a tantalizing hint about something that, barring the discovery of a new source, will forever provoke questions without answers, or at least answers without robust support. It is important to emphasize this because many Christians continue to appeal to the appearance to the 500 as though it carries great apologetical weight. Yet we really know nothing about this ostensibly stupendous event. We have only a brief assertion from someone who was not there that it happened, and we cannot name a single individual who was involved. Okay, what's next?
Paul says that Jesus appeared to the disciples, and then he appeared to 400 people all at once. I mean, if we read the Gospel of Luke and the Gospel of Luke and Acts, so same author wrote these both documents, he says that Jesus was walking around teaching them for 40 days after he was resurrected from the dead. And so these are written within a time period when you have people who would have.
Bet you Wes wouldn't tell you. You see, this is what's wrong with Christianity. And this is what I hope to do until I die. Be balanced. Luke supposedly wrote Acts. Am I correct? Luke wrote Acts and Luke supposedly wrote Luke, right? Watch your mouth, Ogunbola. Watch your mouth. Leave them bills alone. Now watch this. Luke says in Acts 1, 3-9, and every Christian that's listening would bear witness to this. He said that Jesus taught for 40 days. Then he ascended into heaven, right? Luke 24:51 says Jesus was carried up into heaven the same day he was resurrected. How could the same writer write two different time periods where they ascended? What's going on here from the same writer? So let's talk about, that's what I would have asked him if I was there with Joe Rogan. So why is Luke saying something else somewhere else? So you see, when you're making up the same story and you're supposedly the same writer, you got to tell your story the same way every time. That's when you know somebody is lying. That's what we do. When a police interviews you, right? And he says, tell me what happened. And you start telling him what happened. He's asking you the same questions over and over just to see if your story is going to change. Luke says, okay, 40 days later, he ascended into heaven. He taught for 40 days, the Pentecost. What about in Luke 24:51? He said he was carried up to heaven the same night. So who is right? Come on, Luke, get your story straight. This is what happened when you're lying. Now, as a Christian, you can't say that because you believe in the book. But you know what I'm saying is facts. That's a contradiction by the same supposedly writer. And I don't think Luke wrote it. But at the end of the day, according to tradition, Luke wrote Acts and Luke wrote Luke. You got to tell the same story, bro. Let's get it right. Let's go.
Have seen Jesus's ministry who were there, say at something like the feeding of the 5,000, who could have been able to verify or debunk some of these things that are being said.
Again, Wes appears to be assuming a radically early date for the Gospel of Luke's composition. Most scholars suggest an earlier state of between 80 and 90 AD, in part because of its literary dependence on Mark's Gospel. But even if Luke was earlier than this, any eyewitnesses would have been elderly or dead. And besides, Luke's Gospel only recounts Jesus appearing to 2 disciples on the road to Emmaus, then the rest of the disciples in Jerusalem before ascending into heaven. The book of Acts implies that he appeared to a few more people, some named, some not. But it's not like we've got a huge list of names.
Or debunk some of these things that are being said.
Again, Wes appears to be assuming a radically early date for the Gospel of Luke's composition. Most scholars suggest an earlier state of between 80 and 90 AD, in part because of its literary dependence on Mark's Gospel. But even if Luke was earlier than this, any eyewitnesses would have been elderly or dead. And besides, Luke's Gospel only recounts Jesus appearing to 2 disciples on the road to Emmaus, then the rest of the disciples in Jerusalem before ascending into heaven. The book of Acts implies that he appeared to a few more people, some named, some not. But it's not like we've got to be assuming a radically early date for the Gospel of Luke's composition. Most scholars suggest an earlier state of between 80 and 90 AD, in part because of its literary dependence on Mark's Gospel. But even if Luke was earlier than this, any eyewitnesses would have been elderly or dead. And besides, Luke's Gospel only recounts Jesus appearing to 2 disciples on the
road to Emmaus. This is in Luke, by the way, family. This is in the book of Luke.
Road to Emmaus, then the rest of the disciples in Jerusalem before ascending into heaven. The book of
before ascending into heaven, just like I said. Look at it right here. Look at the verse.
AD, in part because of its literary dependence on Mark's Gospel. But even if Luke was earlier than this, any eyewitnesses would have been elderly or dead. And besides, Luke's Gospel only recounts Jesus appearing to 2 disciples on the road to Emmaus, then the rest of the disciples in Jerusalem before ascending into.
See, right there. Luke 24, verses 51. See? And when he had led them out of the vicinity of Bethany, he lifted up his hands and blessed them. While he was blessing them, he left them and was taken up into heaven. Luke 24, 51. Ladies and gentlemen, guess what? Billy Carson, this scripture is not even in the Codex Sinaiticus. We'll get into that another time. I'm vindicating Billy Carson today, y'all. But in Luke, so if in Luke 24:51, he resurrects and ascends the same day within 24 hours, how is it in Acts he was on earth for 40 days after resurrecting? So is Luke a liar? Like how y'all calling Billy Carson a liar? Luke a liar. Oh, you can't say that about Luke. Why not?
To heaven. The book of Acts implies that he appeared to a few more people, some named, some not. But it's not like we've got a huge list of names that people could find and interrogate, especially since most of them would probably have been dead by then anyway. Also, some scholars are beginning.
My brother asks a beautiful question. Very good question, Drew 72. Why don't you come on my panel so we could talk about it? Where does it say same day? All you got to do is read Luke 24. Everything that's happening is on the same day. So in the same day, the same 24-hour period, my brother, you said same night. When he got resurrected, he met with some people and he did some things. And in that evening, he went up into heaven. That's all it is, my brother. All right. Thanks for the question.
Beginning to suggest that Luke Acts might have been written much later, with some thinking that it displays a knowledge of the writings of Josephus from the 90s. This is a minority view, but one held by some major players in the field. Whatever the case, the point is, again, that we simply cannot have any certainty on this stuff. Most of it is educated guesswork. For Wes to say with confidence that the Gospels can be dated to within the lifetime of the eyewitnesses, and especially to say this of all of them, is, I think, again, just too optimistic. We're going to jump forward a bit here now. Wes is arguing that Jesus definitely died on the cross, which I think I agree with, but he then says this.
Atheist, agnostic, Christian scholars, they will say if we can know anything about Jesus, like they'll cast a doubt on a lot of the things that we read about in the Gospels in terms of the actual historical Jesus of Nazareth. They'll say one thing we can be sure of is that he died by crucifixion under Pontius Pilate. Because we have not just multiple attested documents that we refer to as the New Testament, but Roman and Greek and Jewish writers refer to that claim afterwards and talk about the fact that you have this guy, and it's mocked within earliest Christianity. So one of our earliest, in fact, not one of, the earliest depiction of Jesus on the cross is called the Alexamenos Graffito. And it's probably from the end of the 1st century. And it's it depicts an individual with their arms raised in an act of worship, worshiping a man with a donkey's head who's being crucified. Whoa. And right beside it, it says Alexamenos worships his God in Greek. Whoa. And it's mocking.
The Alexamenos Graffito is really cool, and indeed perhaps the earliest surviving depiction of Jesus. I think the so-called magical gemstone in the British Library is tied for this spot. Wes says that it's, quote, probably from the end of the 1st century.
And it's probably from the end of the 1st century.
But again, dating it is difficult, and most experts date it to the late 2nd or 3rd century. Some think it could be earlier, sure, but again, I think Wes is just speaking with a little bit too much confidence here. Just like with the Gospel of John, I think Wes is dragging things into the 1st century that don't necessarily belong there, without properly underscoring that all of his datings are highly contested. Anyway, let's jump forward again.
Then 400 people saw him afterwards.
That's the claim that Paul makes.
Paul makes this.
Yeah.
And how many different people have some sort of a recollection or a writing or something that's attributed to them of being witness?
Hey, 720 visions. This is why Billy Carson got into problems. The crucifixion is mentioned in the earliest mentions of the Mark inscriptions. And there's also the empty tomb. He is risen. So the tomb is not a there's no evidence that people met with him after he resurrected, but it says he's risen and the tomb is empty. So the presupposition is that he's not in the tomb. How he got out of the tomb is a whole nother conversation, but we do have records that he was crucified in Mark. So Mark, that's why Billy Carson got in trouble. So you got to correct that, beloved. All right, just to be clear. Okay. All right, let's go. All right, let's yeah, we got to be fair with our approach. We can't be biased. We understand 4 billion Christians being popular don't make you right. And Christianity got the best game in town. I don't care if you're an Israelite, a Muslim, you got to give it up for Christianity. Yo. They've been rocking for 2,000 years, and now they're getting oppositions. But I'm going to tell y'all Christians, leave them Israelites alone. Ain't nobody studying them scriptures like Israelites. Them boys is bad. I ain't going front. Them boys, if you not well versed in the scripture and know that the text, the Hebrew and the Greek, don't mess with a Hebrew Israelite. Leave them dudes alone. They are beasts at this. All right, let's go
to his resurrection.
We have Peter, Paul, Jude, James, and Matthew, Mark, and Luke.
Okay, let's break this down. Wes just mentioned 7 names, including some gospel authors. We'll start with the non-gospel sources.
Peter, Paul, Jude, James.
Peter, Paul, Jude, and James. Remember, we're looking for people who wrote about witnessing the resurrection. Although, interestingly, Rogan actually only asked about who has been attributed as writing about witnessing the resurrection, not necessarily who actually did write about it.
Or something that's attributed to them.
But even then, there are problems. So first is Peter. There are 2 epistles in the New Testament attributed to this apostle. 1st and 2nd Peter. Importantly, most scholars do not think that Peter actually wrote both of these texts, especially 2nd Peter, which is one of the most disputed texts in the New Testament. They're still early texts, but probably not both written by Peter. At least one of them is likely a forgery. There are scholars who defend the Petrine authorship of both epistles, of course, but the consensus is against them. Second is Paul. There are 13 epistles in the New Testament attributed to Paul, but many of these are also believed not to have actually been written by him. The consensus is that 7 of them are undisputedly his, whereas the rest are contested. Some, like 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus, are firmly believed to be pseudonymous, written by somebody else. But even if Paul wrote all of these letters, remember what we're looking for here. Remember what Rogan asked.
Some sort of a recollection or a writing or something that's attributed to them of being witness to his resurrection.
Paul never claims to have encountered the physically resurrected Jesus. Even his conversion story in Acts just describes him seeing a flash of light and hearing the voice of Christ while on the road to Damascus. He never even claimed to meet the risen Jesus in the flesh, which I think is what Rogan is looking for here. Our 3rd name is Jude. There's one short epistle in the New Testament which claims to be written by Jude, the brother of James. James being James, the brother of Jesus. Surprise, surprise, this is highly disputed. But whatever the case, it doesn't actually matter, because the real problem is this. Jude's epistle doesn't even mention the resurrection. It's not in there. So Wes is wrong even just to say that a written witness to the resurrection has been attributed to Jude, let alone actually written by him. Rogan is looking here for accounts of the resurrection written by those who witnessed it. Jude simply doesn't count, even if he did write that epistle, because he simply doesn't write about the resurrection in it. And there's a similar problem with the 4th name that Wes mentions, James, whose epistle in the New Testament, again with some dispute over the authorship, also simply does not recount his witness to the resurrection. Wes is wrong to bring him up as well. So, asked by Joe Rogan for people who wrote about the resurrection, Wes Huff is choosing people who have letters attributed to them, but either didn't actually write them, or didn't even claim in those letters to have seen the resurrected Jesus. Wes then talks about the gospel authors.
We have Peter, Paul, Jude, James, and Matthew, Mark, and Luke. The thing with Matthew, Mark, and Luke is that Matthew and John are attributed to direct disciples of Jesus. Luke and Mark are not. So they are not eyewitnesses within the Jesus community. In fact, Luke prefaces his gospel by saying that.
Just a point of clarification here. Where Wes says that the gospels of Matthew and John are attributed to the apostles Matthew and John, they're not attributed by the texts themselves. The Gospels do not anywhere identify their own authors. They don't even claim to be written by anyone in particular. It's later Christian tradition which associates those names, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, with the Gospels. I'm not saying that Wes claimed that the Gospels do identify their own authors, by the way. I just think it might have been unclear for somebody listening, so just pointing it out. But some people, and I don't know if Wes is one of them, do think that John's Gospel does identify its author, does tell us who wrote it. But he doesn't do this by saying, my name's John and I wrote this Gospel. Instead, throughout the Gospel, a disciple is mentioned, who's only ever identified as the one whom Jesus loved. Here's an example from John chapter 19, the crucifixion of Jesus. When Jesus saw his mother there, and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to her, "Woman, here is your son," and to the disciple, "Here is your mother." From that time on, the disciple took her into his home. So the beloved disciple is quite an important figure, seemingly the person who looks after Mary, the mother of God, after Jesus dies. Later in that same chapter, the text says, "The man who saw it has given testimony, and his testimony is true. He knows that he tells the truth, and he testifies so that you also may believe." And it looks implied here that the man being spoken about is the beloved disciple, who's mentioned just a moment earlier. In John chapter 21, Jesus is talking about the beloved disciple, and then the text says, "This is the disciple who testifies to these things and who wrote them down. We know that his testimony is true." He's the one that wrote them down. Now, the beloved disciple is often identified with John, the son of Zebedee, that is, the Apostle John. And since we're told here that it's him who wrote it all down, John is the author of this gospel. That is why some people claim that John's gospel identifies its author. But there are a few problems with this. First, the beloved disciple is never explicitly named as John. Nobody knows who it is. He's mentioned 6 times in total, only in the Gospel of John, but is never named. Some people think that it might be Lazarus, for example. Some people even think that it might be Mary Magdalene, but I think that's a bit tenuous. But suppose we just knew that the beloved disciple is John. Fine. Still, notice that the 4th Gospel only ever speaks about the beloved disciple in the 3rd person. In John 19, the man who saw it has given testimony, and his testimony is true. It's not clear that this man is the same man writing down the words that we're reading right now. It's not even clear that this man is the beloved disciple, who's mentioned some 9 verses earlier as standing nearby the cross with the 3 Marys. He's the only man that's mentioned stood nearby, so it might have been him, but we don't know. We're never explicitly told. Okay, but in John 21, we're told that the beloved disciple wrote his testimony down. Fine, but again, it's in the 3rd person. It doesn't say, I, the beloved disciple, wrote these things down. It says, this is the disciple who testifies to these things and wrote them down. We know that his testimony is true. There's a separation there. We know that his testimony is true. And even if the Gospel of John is based on the written testimony of the beloved disciple, it's unclear if we're now reading the words that the beloved disciple used and how much was changed or added later. And we actually know that some parts of John's Gospel were changed and added to later. For example, in John chapters 7 and 8, we find the story of the adulterous woman, where Jesus says, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone." But this story isn't in our earliest manuscripts of John, and so is believed to be a later interpolation, that is, added on at a later date. Also, just take the whole of John's final chapter, chapter 21, which is also thought by many scholars to have been written much later than the rest of John's Gospel and added on at some point in the future. Why do some people think this? Well, here are some reasons identified by Evan Powell in The Unfinished Gospel. First, John 21 uses 28 unique Greek terms not found in any of the other chapters of John's Gospel. Some of these words are subject-specific, like the word breakfast, but others, like the verb to turn, epistrophane, are not. This word is not found anywhere else in John, but it is found in the Synoptic Gospels. Second, John 21 mentions that the disciples are fishermen for the first time in the whole of John's Gospel. John 1 through 20 doesn't seem to know that they're fishermen at all. Again, though, of course, the Synoptic Gospels are well aware of their occupation. Third, John 21 also just seems generally discordant with the end of John 20, which already sounds like it could be the end of the Gospel. Look at the end of John chapter 20. Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. Doesn't that sound like it kind of could be the end of the gospel? Maybe, maybe not. Not a particularly strong piece of evidence. But consider this. In John chapter 20, the disciples meet the risen Jesus, and they receive the Holy Spirit and are sent out into the world to forgive people's sins. And in the next chapter, they're fishing in Galilee. Even though Jesus just commanded them to go out and spread the word and forgive people's sins, they decide to just go back to business as usual, I suppose. It seems a little bit strange. The upshot is that many scholars think that John 21 was added much later than the composition of the rest of John's Gospel and added by somebody who'd read the Synoptic Gospels. Now, importantly, we don't have any manuscript evidence for this. We don't have any early manuscripts that are missing John chapter 21, for example. But our earliest complete manuscript of John's Gospel only dates from the 4th century. So we just don't have any really early manuscripts of John at all. We don't know whether the earliest complete manuscripts of John contained chapter 21 or not. But anyway, we've gone a little bit off track. Do you remember the verse that we were discussing? The one which claims that the beloved disciple wrote down his testimony? Do you remember where that comes from? John chapter 21. Look, all of this is, of course, as with everything in this field, a matter of dispute. But the main thing is that Wes Huff is making confident claims about who wrote the Gospels and when, and about attestations to Jesus' resurrection in ways which I think require more clarification at least, and which run against the scholarly consensus. He's welcome to make these claims, of course, but I would just like to see either a bit more lenience in his claims about the dating and authorship of these texts, or more defense of the dates and the authors that he believes in. But okay, that's it. Wes, if you're watching, you are, of course, welcome to come on my podcast anytime.
All right. Let me ask you a question. Anybody who is a Bible believer, hey, give me a second. I'm gonna call you back, okay? All right. Sorry about that, family. Let me ask every Christian in the audience. What is one of the main things you study about Christianity that pulled you to Christianity? I'm going to ask the question right now to everybody that believes, the Israelites. What pulled you to the New Testament Jesus story more? What is it that you heard that made you like, damn, really and truly? I'm going to tell you what I heard. I heard that they died for what they believed in. The Christians would die for what, nobody would die for what they believe in if they didn't believe it was true. They wouldn't die for a guy that never existed. Courtney, no. One of the greatest arguments I heard growing up is that they died for what they believe in. So yesterday I'm listening to my good friends, Derek from Myth Vision and Gnostic Informant, Neil from Gnostic Informant, and he brought out something that I knew for years, but I always said I would bring this out during the debate if I was debating a Christian. Because Christians like, why would they die for what they believe in? Why would they die for what they believe in? Like that makes them special. So check out Neil and Derek talking yesterday on Gnostic Informant channel. And shout out to them for this. This was a very good conversation right here. Check it out.
Yes. And how since his cremation, he had beheld him in white raiment a little while ago, and had just now left him walking about cheerfully in the portico of the Seven Voices, wearing a garland of wild olive. Then on top of it all, he put the vulture, swearing he himself had seen it flying up out of the pyre, when I myself had just previously let it fly to ridicule fools and dullards. What he's saying is, I made this shit up. And this guy with a beard who's very confident just told everyone, I saw the vulture and it went to Mount Olympus. And he's like, dude, I just made this shit up. One day later, and this myth.
You want to know something crazy?
Dude,
I used to move. I used to move the Ouija board. I was that guy.
Bro.
And people were so into it. But yeah, no, that's crazy. That's so crazy. By the way, that reminds me of something before we continue, because it's cool that we're stopping because we're not going to hopefully get flagged like the last video. This guy, Zarmanikigis, or Zarmaris, according to Cassius Dio. He's also mentioned by Nicholas. This is how I know about it. I read Nicholas Damascus. That's one of my favorite texts. I don't know why. The life of Augustus. Anyways, this dude, I'm gonna find the source right here. It's in here somewhere. Oh, here we go. Strabo's account. Let's see if they have. Yeah, let's read Strabo's account. This dude says, according to Nicholas of Damascus, near Antioch, near Daphne, he met with ambassadors from the Indians. So, okay, let me tell you the context real quick. 8 Indian people, I think only 3 of them make it, go on a pilgrimage from India all the way to Eleusis near Athens to go and get initiated into the Eleusinian mysteries, which is once a year, the greater mysteries, right? It's in the fall. And so they all travel here, and this is what happens. This is crazy. It appeared from the letter that several persons were mentioned, only 3 survived. Yeah, I was right. Whom he saw. The rest had died chiefly in consequence of the length of the journey. The letter was written in Greek upon a skin. The import of it was that Porus was the writer, that although he was sovereign of 600 kings, yet the highly esteemed the friendship of Caesar, that he was willing to allow him passage through his country in whatever part he pleased, and to assist him in any undertaking that was just. 8 naked servants with girdles round their waist and fragment with perfumes presented the gifts to Augustus, which were brought. The presents were a Hermes, a man born without arms, like a statue, whom I have seen. That's what Nicholas of Damascus says he saw it himself. He wrote this in the 1st century. Large snakes, a serpent 10 cubits in length, a river tortoise of 3 cubits, and a partridge in a pear tree. That's what it sounds like. They were accompanied by the person, it is said, who burnt himself to death at Athens. This is the dude. This is what I'm talking about.
Yep.
This is the practice with persons in distress who seek to escape existing calamities, and with others in prosperous circumstances, as was the case with this man. I promise I'm making a point here.
No, I get it.
For as everything hitherto had succeeded with him, he thought it necessary to depart, lest some unexpected calamity should happen to him, by continuing to live with a smile. Therefore, naked, anointed, from the mysteries, by the way, this is the bad source. Strabo, shame on you, because there's a better source about this.
Right.
I'll tell you why. But here's what the inscription of his tomb says. Zarmanokigis, an Indian, a native of Bargosa, having immortalized himself according to the custom of his country, here lies. Now, the reason why this I don't like the source is because in Nicholas of Damascus' account, he says the reason why he killed himself is because he got initiated into the Eleusinian mysteries and was so blown away by the initiation ceremony that he no longer feared death, and it was time for him to go die.
It's so funny.
They believed in this mystery so much that they're willing to die for it.
And your point is,
that's what the Christians say, isn't it?
Huh?
Isn't that what the Christians say?
That's exactly the point.
So why don't we bring up the Eleusinian mysteries? It's just
bring up Ignatius, letter to the Romans. Ignatius. I'm going to pull it up and then share the screen because this dude. I've never seen anything more suicidal, to be honest with you. Ignatius.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So my point is, while you're pulling that up, my point is, this guy who traveled all the way from India, he had maybe he was suffering. I don't know what the deal is. Dio added his own little, or Strabo added some more thing because he was sick or something. I don't remember hearing that from Nicholas of Damascus, the original account. In the original account, he gets initiated into the mysteries. It was so blown away by the initiation ceremony, that he jumped into a fire and self-immolated himself.
Bingo.
That's how he was saved by the gods. He was saved by Demeter and Dionysus. There was no.
Again, they would die for what they believe in. And you as a Christian listening to this like, oh, they really believe in that crap? That's how people look at Christianity. You really believe this stuff? Come on. It's the same thing. It's just that this one, you ever had a song like You ever heard what's the name of that rapper that did the song I Got a Man? Positive K. Positive K did a song called this Pimp Song by Big Daddy Kane, wrote the record in like 1991 or 92. And then he came out with a song called I Got a Man. I got a man. What that got to do with me? I got a man. I'm not trying to hear that though. I got a man. The song crossed over and Positive K became this huge star, bigger than Big Daddy Kane, Rakim, all of them rappers from Brooklyn. And Positive K was a dude that was just hanging around with them that they put on. And he crossed over. This is the same thing with Christianity. It crossed over. Crossed over, family. So I'm saying to y'all, this is what I'm saying to y'all, right? This is what I'm saying. I'm saying Christianity crossed over and became so popular that it became the religion of the Roman Empire. But family, that don't mean it's true. I'm not trying to hear that, G. I got a man. Shout out to Mika, man. That's my ride or die right there. Peace and love to that queen right there, man. Sister Queen, big in the building. All right. But the point is, family, this is what happened with Christianity. It don't make it right. Just like how we don't think the elusive mysteries is right. Them folks feel it was right. The dude was willing to die for it. So you dying. Gave literally to Christ to not be killed. Yes, some of the emphasis on the martyrs is there. But yeah, so that's why I played that little clip. But I'm gonna play another clip now with what you call it. Y'all gotta check this out, man. We going in, man. I got a man. I'm not trying to hear that though. I got a man. Oh, that song was the joint. I remember that joint, man. But yo, again, everybody see how big that song was? My man all the way in St. Martin, he knew it. I'm all the way in Jamaica, I know it. Mika grew up in Brooklyn, of course, she knew it. Everybody know that song. Jew 72, did Jesus exist? I hold to that. Jesus is historical. I hold to that. Big tune. You see, everybody relates to that analogy. That's the perfect analogy for Christianity, man. Positive K did his song called The Night Shift with Big Daddy Kane. Ain't nobody care about that song. Everybody liked it. It was cool, talking about pimping the chicks. But when he came out with I Got a Man, hold up. Let me go on YouTube and punch in Positive K, I Got a Man, and see how many views it got. Let me punch it in right now. I got a man. I got a man. Positive K. Look at this right here, family. 15 million views. Let me share the screen and show y'all. 15 million views for I Got a Man by Positive K. How many of y'all ever got a million views? Plus, he got another person who put it up and he got 308,000 views. He got so many views. It's crazy. I got a man. I'm not trying to hear that though. I got a man. What they got to do with me? I got a man. But yo, look at it right here. Positive K Vivo, and this is from 15 years ago. 15 years ago, and it got how many views? 15 million views. This is the perfect example about Christianity, how it blew up. It crossed over into the mainstream. That's what it did. We got to look at it from that perspective. Let me get this right here. All right. So we're going to get this guy right here. Let's check this out.
Wes Huff flames YouTube atheists.
Wes Huff just set the standard for debating non-Christians, and it was an absolute bloodbath.
Wes Huff. He is the man of the hour. At least he is in my life.
Dude, Wes, hands down, without question.
What?
The best stuff I've ever seen.
Right. Wes has successfully refuted every claim that Billy made.
And you had this boss move where you just sort of reach behind, you're like, actually,
Wes Huff. 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 Wes Huff.
If you've been anywhere near Christian apologists since Thanksgiving, you've probably been hearing about their newest golden boy, their single greatest champion since David knocked down Goliath. Canadian PhD student, Wes Huff.
Wes, very nice to meet you.
Joe, pleasure.
So I, like many people, was introduced to you because of the debate you had with Billy Carson.
Quote unquote. His conversation with Billy Carson shot him into the awareness stratosphere like a rocket, going from about just 15,000 YouTube subscribers to 285,000 YouTube subscribers in a little over a month. And that was before his debut on one of the biggest stages in the English-speaking world The Joe Rogan Experience.
We had no idea what linear Elamite even said until 2021.
Oh, well, I never even heard it until 5 seconds ago.
I know. There you go.
All due respect to Wes. He absolutely cooked on the JRE. Charming, articulate, knowledgeable, bringing facts. This good Canadian kid was doing his country proud for the first 2 hours. But that's where the wheels came off, and Huff fell into the same Christian apologetics traps that he used to bury Carson, presenting as true that which is false or speculation.
Most people barely scratch the surface of this stuff.
Right.
And it takes someone like you.
We're going to get to Huff's failures on the resurrection in just a minute, but first, we need a quick TLDR on the past 2 months and how this kid from Canada landed in this chair. And that story starts not with Wes, but with this man, Billy Carson. Carson is the founder and CEO of Forbidden Knowledge, where he promotes self-improvement prosperity through hidden wisdom from aliens and ancient texts. He wrote several books like Compendium of the Emerald Tablets and Woke Doesn't Mean Broke. He started appearing semi-regularly on TV networks like the History Channel and the Discovery Channel. He believes that extraterrestrials have been present and interfering throughout all of human history, that Atlantis was real and had technology more advanced than ours, that giants roamed the earth, that we interact with other dimensions, and so many other things. He claims to be working on alternative propulsion systems for space travel and zero-point energy devices. This is exactly the kind of stuff that Joe Rogan loves to talk about. So it's not surprising Billy appeared on the show earlier last year.
The Pope wanted to baptize the first alien. Now, that's incredible. That's an incredible statement.
If this was my Toast the Toast AM show, I would dig.
Hold on. I never heard that before. He said the Pope wanted to baptize the first alien? Who said that? I mean, who's following this guy? Like, I like him. I think he's cool. I could have a dinner with him, but baptize the Pope wanted to baptize. Yo, you can't even make this stuff up.
Into Carson's claims for hours. Billy appeared on the show earlier last year.
The Pope wanted to baptize the first alien. Now, that's incredible. That's an incredible statement.
If this was my Toast the Toast AM show, I would dig into Carson's claims for hours.
Came across one Bigfoot in an open field. He was about 100 yards away. Two of us shot and dropped him.
No wonder he needs a legal team. This guy may have just shot for goat. Yeah. But believe it or not, today these are all incidental side quests. Unfortunately, for the purposes of today's topic only, Billy Carson and I are ostensibly on the same team, in that we both critique the historical claims of Christianity. And some of his counterpoints are not entirely without merit. But those kernels of truth are entirely lost under audacious claims that simply are not backed up with solid evidence.
Did you know that in the Sinai Bible, which predates the King James Bible, Jesus was never even crucified, guys? He lived on, got married, never got crucified. That was fabricated by the Roman Catholic Church, just like hell was added to the Bible in the 1600s.
He's twisting and misrepresenting sources just enough to make his audience convinced, rightfully assuming that most will never fact-check him. Now, my personal faith journey includes Christian leaders who used concealment and half-truths to keep me in Christianity far longer than I should have been, who lost all benefit of the doubt when I learned for myself. So I really dislike when counter-apologists do the same thing, because getting caught in these overreaches does so much damage to your credibility, as Billy will learn. Enter our story, PhD student Wes Huff, and a relatively spur-of-the-moment invitation.
How did he approach you?
Yeah, so he's friends, or I should say was friends. He was friends with Billy. They live in the same neighborhood.
But I'm here with my good man, Billy Carson. I've known Billy personally for some years now.
Yeah.
Solid friend, great character, businessman.
He's like, I've been hearing Billy say, he wants to debate. Nobody will debate him for years. And so he DM'd me on Instagram and just kind of laid this out like, hey, I'm going to have Billy in my studio in 24 hours. I can tell him you're coming, can tell him who you are. I can give him your background, but would you be willing to come? And so that's what I did. And so that's how it got set up.
The two men spoke for about an hour. You can see the whole thing unedited on Wes's channel, but here are just 3 examples where the Christian apologist calmly and with precision brought his field of Christian manuscript expertise to bear against the overly confident skeptic.
According to the Sinai Bible, Jesus wasn't crucified in that Bible. That Bible predates the King James Version of the Bible.
When you refer to the Sinai Bible, would you be referring to Codex Sinaiticus, like the codex that comes? Okay, I actually have a facsimile. So I have a photocopy that was done by the British Library of Codex Sinaiticus that I work with in my office. So I have it here. The Codex Sinaiticus in particular is just a Greek, it's a 4th century Greek manuscript, and its text of the Gospels reads almost identical to the modern Greek text that we develop translations from. So my curiosity is just simply in kind of exploring when you say that it denies the crucifixion or that the crucifixion isn't there. I mean, I can go on right now, Codex Sinaiticus, and I can look up the end of, say, Matthew 27, where it has Jesus being crucified. And that's in Codex Sinaiticus.
If I'd have heard of Billy Carson's or his claims before, I too would gladly have called him out on this. But Wes pulled it off the shelf. I couldn't pull Codex Sinaiticus off the shelf. I mean, that's some serious flex.
It's one of those things where it's very unfortunate when people get caught with their pants down.
The Sinai Bible, where was that piece
I found
discovered?
the text where I was referencing. Actually, I was misquoted. I misquoted there. It's the Gospel of Barnabas.
So let's deal with that too, because I've actually worked with, there are 2 manuscripts of the Gospel of Barnabas. It is a known forgery. Never mind the fact that we don't have any evidence of it prior to the 14th century, and none in any other language other than Middle Age Italian Italian and Spanish. But the internal content of the Gospel of Barnabas disqualifies it from being ancient. And then the fact that it's doing things like paraphrasing Dante.
Again, just ouch. This isn't jumping on Carson misspeaking. Carson's been relying on the so-called Sinai Bible and the Gospel of Barnabas for his big claims over many years. Those on the Gospel of Jesus' wife.
They discovered the book of Jesus' wife, which is at the Harvard Seminary. They claim that this is an accurate record that Jesus may have even been married.
So the Gospel of Jesus' wife is in the Harvard Library. However, the reason we know it's also not legitimate is because even though the manuscript, the papyrus that it's on, was carbon dated to the 4th century, the text was actually copied from an online version of the Gospel of Thomas in a PDF form, and the mistake on that PDF form was copied into the text that was borrowed in the phraseology of Jesus' wife.
That's fair enough. I can respect that.
When he was on with you, it was quite apparent that you are an actual expert in the Bible and in many religious texts, and that he didn't necessarily have the facts straight.
Now, this conversation would likely have faded into obscurity if Carson could have just taken the L and moved along. Instead, he overreacted and started harassing his friend.
This defendant was considered to be a very close friend. And as you can see in the photos here, top left, he's at my wife's birthday party. Person was at my wedding. That's my wedding down there. But my very, very, what I thought would be my very close friends.
You freaked out. You freaked out so much that you were knocking at my client's door at 2:30 a.m. in the morning with legal papers, acting like you have the power to enforce some type of "you got served."
And, of course, he went after Wes himself.
Different parties, different organizations. One is the RCMP. That's the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Through them, we were able to get connected with the VDP, the Vancouver Police Department.
Never mind that Vancouver is way over here and Wes lives in Toronto, which is way over here.
But we know that the NDP, from the University of Ontario, these people that are these religious zealots, we know what they're into.
The NDP is a Canadian political party way left of the U.S. Democratic Party. Conservative Christians rarely support the NDP.
Billy Carson is attempting to sue me. Billy does not want you to see those clips and has sent me a cease and desist letter.
Now, I too have had a prominent debate opponent sending me similar cease and desist letters to remove the content. Though, like Wes, I suspect it won't go any further.
I mean, I was never worried because I'm a Canadian, and anybody who's tried to sue internationally knows that.
Good luck.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And Carson took to a live stream to address the conversation, giving Christian YouTube even more fodder.
So, Billy Carson recently hosted a 3.5-hour live stream to address his poor debate performance against Wes Huff. But instead of him redeeming himself, it became one of the most painful, self-inflicted disasters that I've ever seen.
Carson made excuses about being too sick to make his points, accused the organizers of ambushing him, cutting off his microphone, and being part of an organized cabal against him, and even using AI and deepfake technology to alter his performance. All that instead of just admitting that he had made some mistakes. If this ever happens to me, I will follow up with videos about why I'm wrong and how I will course correct in the future.
Well, the irony of this situation is if he just kind of left it, it probably wouldn't have made anywhere close to the splash that it's made. And we told him that. We said, like, hey, Barbra Streisand effect is going to happen.
The Streisand effect is a phenomenon in which an attempt to suppress or hide information has the unintended consequence of publicizing the information more widely.
Yeah.
Like, you're a big enough personality that if I make a video and say, like, hey, I had this conversation, didn't go well for Billy, and Billy doesn't want it released, that's going to start to gain traction sooner or later.
And gain traction it did. Apologies to those who don't care about the drama, but I needed to first set the stage before we talk about Wes's claims about the resurrection to Joe Rogan. You see, during the debate with Carson, Huff was able to land some devastating blows when the topic was exactly in his lane of ancient manuscripts.
Yeah, I made something for you.
Ooh.
I make papyri facsimiles. So that's a genuine Egyptian papyri that I made. I cut it out for you, and then I transcribed the text on that manuscript.
This is you nerded out.
I know. I'm
for real nerded out. This is a real nerding out of.
And with those specific death punches, Huff is building a reputation and mystique of his expertise.
I'm not an expert in many things, but the things that I am an expert on, you could wake me up at 4 o'clock in the morning and ask me about those things. And I go, oh yeah, no,
yeah,
this is what it is.
Yeah.
I know, like martial arts or comedy, I could give you an expert version of reality. It seems like he does not have that. You've spent a lot of time on this. This is not a casual cursory examination of these texts and of religion. This is a long journey. And that's what's particularly exceptional and really interesting to me, because I'm always fascinated by people that have really gone down the road, like really gone down the road, because you don't meet a whole lot of them. I know a lot of Christians that can quote you some versions of the New Testament, some Psalms, but the real, the go all the way to the back, way. And that's what you've done. That's very interesting.
With Wes's deep knowledge of manuscripts, Joe Rogan is attributing to Wes perceived authority and giving him more and more deference on an expanding circle of adjacent topics beyond the primary expertise.
If you are really good at expressing yourself and really like you show confidence in your convictions, you can persuade a lot of people.
Yeah. Confidence is not competency.
Yes.
And unfortunately, those things get confused a lot. Like,
well, it covers up for competency sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In religion and politics and like all sorts of things, right?
And everything. It's such a complex and fascinating subject. It really is. And I think it's because of the barrier to entry is so high. There's so much to learn. There's so much to dig that most people barely scratch the surface of this stuff.
Right.
And it takes someone like you to really because it's like real easy to lean into the fun stuff. It's real easy to lean into the Anunnaki stuff but the actual real shit that we know is 100% the accounts of people that lived back then.
Do you hear this, Wes? Joe, and presumably his audience, are looking to someone like you to be their surrogate into the scholarship. Because you are so good in some areas, Joe's accepting everything you say at face value and relatively uncritically.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Now, there are other experts in the field. For example, friend of this channel and also friend of Wes, Dr. Kip Davis.
I have a couple of friends who have actually worked on projects that have revealed forgeries within Dead Sea Scroll manuscripts and within other ancient Christian papyri.
I found out about it very shortly after it happened directly from Wes. Wes Huff is he's a friend.
When it comes to scholarship, Kip is a grizzled veteran compared to Wes's burgeoning credentials. And Kip observed what I did and did his own 3.5-hour live stream to point out ways that Wes's claims outside of manuscript identification simply don't hold up to scholarly scrutiny.
You know, Wes is certainly a budding scholar, if not, you know, a scholar in fact already. So now the awkward part of this is that he is also still a Christian apologist who also still engages in Christian apologetics and the sorts of tropes and maybe the sorts of informational tactics that you see from many Christian apologists when it comes to discussing the biblical text and discussing matters of history. So right off, I just want to say I think it's important to provide a critical view of what happened here, because as much as I was cheering, as much as I have been cheering Wes on in this noble endeavor to confront the misinformation of Billy Carson, I think it's also important to point out that many of the things that Wes does say in this discussion do require some critical reflection. We do need to talk about critical scholarship with regards to some of the things in this exchange.
If you want to check out Kip's critique of Wes's scholarly shortcomings in the Carson debate, beyond his handful of undeniable punches landed, I'll put a link in the description. Now, in that same spirit, I want to give Wes props for a very solid performance for the first 2 hours and 20 minutes of Rogan's show. But when the topic shifted to Jesus' resurrection, Wes simply lost all of his scholarly nuance, the kind of nuance he specifically purported to be giving.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's why, experts themselves feel a lot of inadequacy, is because they study a subject and realize, like, I'm never going to get to the bottom of this hole.
Right.
So, unfortunately,
most subjects are very, very nuanced and very deep. I mean,
Yeah.
especially when you're talking about ancient religion.
Yeah.
The scholarly nuance was gone, and Wes reverted to apologetics mode, even less subtle than the stuff we get from garden variety non-credentialed evangelicals, like journalist Lee Strobel or cold case detective J. Warner Wallace. Sometimes even worse. Look, I'm the first to admit that I'm an expert in nothing, except maybe pre-Disney era Star Wars. But I'm not going on mega platforms inferring that because I work for George Lucas and can correctly spell Wookiee and Kashyyyk on command, that therefore you should take what I say about Jesus more seriously. In just a few days, this interview and the resurrection clip from it have already been viewed millions of times. So with a platform this big and being the new Christian debate champion and his built-up artifice of expertise, I'm very concerned about the unnuanced proclamations he made being wrongfully elevated to the same certainty as his true but relatively banal knowledge that Codex Sinaiticus indeed contains the 4 Gospels.
And I think pretty much everyone who has some sort of base level competency in the subjects that were talked about in that conversation with Billy could too. It just happened to be me who was given the opportunity to do so.
So let's get into it.
Yeah.
It's a miracle that it was created at all. Like the whole idea that Christianity, when you're saying that the book of, was it the book of Isaiah?
Yeah.
that the same book is exactly the same as, like, that's a miracle. That's pretty fucking crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Now, this exactly the same miracle Joe mentions is a callback to Huff claiming this earlier in the interview.
So when you say the book of Isaiah is intact, how similar is it to the book of Isaiah that's in the Bible?
So that one is fascinating. So this isn't true for all of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but when we discovered the Great Isaiah Scroll, previous to that, the earliest copy of Isaiah that we had was in the Masoretic text, which is in the Middle Ages.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it was literally 1,000 years. We literally pushed back our understanding of Isaiah 1,000 years. And the thing that really shocked scholars, like I said, this isn't true for all of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but one of the things that shocked them about Isaiah was that it was word for word identical to the Masoretic text.
Word for word.
Word for word.
Wow.
Now, Wes just so fully convinced Joe Rogan that a Dead Sea Scroll copy of Isaiah is word for word identical to the Masoretic text, to the extent where Joe is repeating the claim just a few hours later, and is very likely going to propagate this claim again in the future. But is the Dead Sea Scroll Isaiah word for word identical?
That you can see this. A lot of it's been copied word for word into the biblical text.
But what's the word for word?
In your version of
what does Wes's Dead Sea Scroll specialist friend that he shouted out on the show have to say about this?
You see this word for word argument? When Billy say it, again, I'm pointing out when Billy says it, it's World War V. But when Wes does it, oh, he just made an error. He's just a guy that made an error. Craziness.
At a glance, at a cursory glance, when you're looking at this large manuscript full of Isaiah, it looks like it's very, very much the same as what we have in our Bibles. So what apologists have been very guilty of doing time and time again is saying that this particular manuscript, 1Q Isaiah A, this very impressive complete copy of the book of Isaiah, is virtually identical to the Masoretic text. In 1Q Isaiah A, there are over 2,600 textual variants. In fact, when the editors, Eugene Ulrich and Peter Flint, wrote their edition, one of the things that I did as a PhD student for weeks and weeks and weeks on end was I put together these collections of textual variants, and inside the edition, it's literally pages and pages and pages of variations cataloged from this particular manuscript. Now, I will say the vast majority of them have to do with just small variations, and these are not the spelling variations. That's something different. That's what we call orthography. This is actual, shifts within the text, but they're very, very small sorts of things. The way that you would mark a preposition, whether you attach it to the word or keep it separate, the same with like pronouns, whether it's suffix to the end of the word or separate, those sorts of things. But there are certainly a number of quite interesting, I would say, relatively significant differences within this 2,600 textual variants.
So, Wes, can a document with 2,600 non-spelling variations honestly be said to be word for word identical? Out of the 50,000 words or so, that would still make the scroll 95% identical.
If you just imagine the sheer number of illiterate people, the sheer number of days that have to go by where people are telling the story exactly the same, and that it's entrusted in the hands of these very few people that are so dedicated to it that they get the exact words right 1,000 years later, pretty bananas.
You could have said 95% identical and made roughly the same point. But you pushed it to the false claim of 100% identical. And now Joe and his audience of millions thinks we have a word for word 100% miracle. This is the same kind of overstatement that Carson was criticized for. But so far, I've heard no Christian call Wes out for.
Well, I mean, that is kind of the crazy thing about Christianity, where you have this Jewish itinerant guy who's walking around first century Roman occupied Judea. He's making some pretty audacious claims to be God himself. And then he predicts his own death and resurrection.
I'm going to try not to bring this up too often, but throwing out there, Jesus predicts his own death and resurrection is what you say in apologist mode. When a scholar says this, even if they're full-on resurrection-believing Christians, they will say, according to the Gospels, Jesus predicted his death. Or, if the Bible is correct, Jesus predicted his death. There's simply not enough scholarly agreement that Jesus spoke any of the words in the Gospels to go around in your scholarly capacity to declare any predictions to be historical without some qualification. You know, a longtime scholar of history, more by how many caveats they put in front of a claim than by how confidently they make a claim.
And then they go from 11, scared men, because Judas commits suicide, scared men in an upper room,
if the Gospels are correct,
to completely overhauling the Roman world in only a couple hundred years because of this claim that they say they saw Jesus resurrected.
This is phrased slightly ambiguously, but if the implication is that they're saying they saw Jesus resurrected is itself just a claim, then I agree. There is a claim that the gospel said they saw Jesus. I think only one disciple did this, but that's another discussion for another day.
So what is your personal belief when it comes to the resurrection? What do you think happened? Do you have a belief, or do you just try to interpret the text and try to see what is the message?
Well, I think so. As a historian, I do think it is a historical question. You have a guy who objectively lived. He objectively died.
I will grant these things. Some would not, but carry on.
And then individuals close to his inner circle claim that they see him not dead.
Right.
Again.
There is a claim that they claimed this.
But it's hard when you're dealing with illiterate populations, you're dealing with thousands of years of time, you're dealing with an oral tradition, and then you have us sitting here talking about it in 2024. It's very difficult for anybody who thinks of themselves as an intelligent person who's secular to even entertain the possibility that someone died and come back to life.
Some good notes here from Joe. Probably the most relevant is that there was an oral tradition about Jesus for decades before the first Gospels were written down.
And if a miracle did take place and you were there, you don't have a camera, you don't have a cell phone, you don't have a pen, you can't write things down, maybe you can't even read, and you have this thing that happens to you.
There's literally no way of knowing to what extent legendary development was introduced into the story before it was written down. As to not entertaining the possibility, well, I'm very open to the possibility. The problem is testimonial evidence. It is always going to be more likely that a person is mistaken or that a person is lying than that they have correctly attributed something as a miracle. I'm open to a resurrection, but it will take more than testimony.
And I get that. But we've already talked about the fact that we don't think that the only thing that exists is matter and motion. We as in you and I, right? Like we believe that there's something else going on in this world that's a little bit crazy.
There's something else.
And that to, I think, exclude that, I think excludes something that you're kind of putting blinders on.
I've yet to be shown anything that defies a naturalistic explanation. But again, I'm open to it. I will accept something beyond matter as soon as it has been sufficiently demonstrated. That is not the same as having blinders.
And you do have, I mean, you're right in terms of all of these ancient conventions and the ways that things were spread around. But the Gospels are written in the lifetime of the eyewitnesses.
The only firsthand eyewitness account we have is from Paul. And unless you adopt dates radically earlier than general scholarship, Paul was definitely dead before the Gospels were written. Peter was also dead before the Gospels were written. Yes, there probably were some individual humans who set their eyes on pre-crucifixion Jesus who were also alive when Mark was written, but most would put that time span as a 40-year gap. They were either kids on one end or pretty old for first century on the other end. Was anyone who saw anything meaningful still alive? Maybe. We have no idea.
And they're written in this period of time where you have groups of individuals who could have fact-checked those things.
How do
So
you fact check someone coming back from the dead?
Great question, Joe. I will never know how apologists imagine this would go.
How do you fact check somebody coming from the Yo, that's the best question Joe Rogan ever asked in his life. In his life. Go ahead and show us how you prove somebody rose from the dead, bruh.
What if 100 people were going around saying, well, I never saw Jesus come back from the dead, as if all the Christians would have said, oh, okay. If you say he didn't, then I guess he didn't. For all we know, 6 of the disciples themselves were going around saying Jesus did no miracles and definitely didn't come back. Would that have actually dissuaded believers? And how would we in 2025 ever know about it? History's copied by the victors. I'm sure you've tried to correct people on something false about you. Does that actually stop everyone from believing that false thing? No, it does not.
Well, if you,
how many people saw his body, right?
Well, Paul says that 400 people saw him all at once.
400 people saw the crucifixion.
No, saw the resurrected Jesus. Yeah, 1 Corinthians 15, Paul says that Jesus appeared to the disciples, and then he appeared to 400 people all at once.
Wes repeats the number 400 here 3 times. But as you probably know, 1 Corinthians 15 claims it was 500 people all at once. 500, not 400. Now, I'm not going to fault Wes for this particular slip. I say something wrong every time I'm live. I used to be really bad at mixing up the various Jameses, so I get it. But that said, I spend a lot of time studying about the resurrection. And if you wake me up at 4 a.m., like Joe was talking about, I'm going to tell you there were 500 witnesses. And what happens when the resurrection affirming scholar, most respected by other scholars, secular Christian alike, talks about these 500 with his scholarship hat on rather than his apologetics hat? Dale Allison?
Apologists won't like a theme that runs through this book, which is how little we know. So I come back to this again and again and again. So you take the appearance to the 500. You just ask any question and you don't know the answer. Who were these people? Were they in the south? Were they in the north? Were they in Galilee? Were they in Jerusalem? But what they saw, how many of these people knew Jesus really well? How did they see him? Really, how did they see him? 500 people, that's a lot. Now it's got to be an approximation, but was there a receiving line? Is there a jumbotron? Some of the church fathers actually think this must have been something like Acts, a heavenly vision. So he's somewhere up in the clouds and, they can see him at once. Anyway, my point is that I don't know the answers to any of these questions. I can't name a single person who was there.
This was Wes with his apologetics hat on, not the scholarly humility he had before.
These are written within a time period when you have people who would have seen Jesus's ministry, who were there, say, at something like the feeding of the 5,000, who could have been able to verify or debunk some of these things that are being said.
How would they have debunked it if the non-Jesus seeing disciples went back to Galilee and started fishing before Jesus's body hit the ground, and then a later Jesus movement is starting up in Jerusalem? What do you think they could possibly do or say, even if so inclined? You can't be a witness to a non-resurrection. And that's not even touching all the legitimate historians who interpret these texts as beginning with a spiritual resurrection that then later morphed into the more physical version we know.
Because Jesus wasn't the only messianic figure who arose and claimed to be the Messiah.
Right.
There were a number of individuals both prior to and after Jesus, but they die and the movement dies with them.
Do you think it's possible?
Joe cuts him off, so we don't know what Wes's point was going to be, but Jesus's ministry itself was rather unspecial. The only thing that makes the Jesus movement special is that it survived its central figure.
I used to have a joke in my act that a cult is fake and it's made by one guy. That guy invented it. In a religion, that guy's dead.
There might be something to that.
Ouch. Joe from earlier in the show.
Do you think it's possible that he didn't die? And do you think it's possible that they thought he was dead? Because that does happen.
Yeah, I mean, we know a lot about Roman crucifixion. And we
Pretty
know
brutal.
that, and we know that they did their job well.
Well, I like to pragmatically acknowledge that if Jesus lived, it's pretty mundane to say he died.
Crucifixion was for the lowest of the low. It was for like slaves. In fact, if you were a Roman citizen, you were banned from being crucified.
Who was it that got crucified upside down?
Peter.
Peter got crucified upside down, you say? What is the source for that, Wes? Why, it's the Acts of Peter, an apocryphal text dated to well over 100 years after Peter died. Do you affirm the Acts of Peter is legitimate elsewhere in the interview?
Because we have a lot of books flying around with the names of John and Peter on them. So you have the Acts of Peter, and you have the Revelation of Peter, and you have the Gospels of Peter, and you have... So how do we do our due diligence to try to tie this back? So there's 2 letters of Peter, 1st and 2nd Peter in the New Testament. And the early Christians are like, we got to make sure we can tie these to Peter.
You seem to affirm it has not from Peter. How can you become famous for pointing out that Billy Carson was drawing information from the Gospel of Barnabas forgery and then turn around and answer Joe Rogan's question with an answer from the Acts of Peter forgery?
Why was it? Because like regular crucifixion wasn't good enough for him, or what was he? What didn't deserve it because Christ had gone through it?
Well, so the story is that they say we're going to crucify you, and he says it's like too big of an honor to die like my Lord, and they say, well, we can fix that.
Oh, Jesus!
Shut
your mouth, buddy.
That's all from the Acts of Peter forgery. You at least put in a "so the story is" as a vague caveat, but you're still doing the same thing Billy Carson was doing. Even an apologist like Sean McDowell has a much better response to this when asked about Peter's death in his role as a scholar who wrote a celebrated book on the fate of the apostles.
I missed something, Nahoa. I can't believe I missed this. It seems so obvious. Is shortly after my dissertation came out, Larry Hurtado edited a book on Peter. And he said, one thing we know about crucifixion is that crucifixion victims were stripped bare to utterly shame and humiliate them. Yet John 21, the debated passage where it says his hands would be spread out, I took that as referring to crucifixion. It also says he would be clothed by another. But that's not how somebody would die of crucifixion, being clothed. So that tells me he, I think almost certainly, historically speaking, died as a martyr, but probably not crucified, let alone crucified upside down.
Are we entirely certain of their measurement of days?
So this is an interesting question because of the differences between when the Gospel of John says Jesus died compared to the Synoptics, because John appears to be using the Roman convention of counting time, and the other Gospels, when they describe the timing, appear to be using the Jewish ones. And actually, if you correlate between the two, they match up pretty well. So the thing is, with Jews, any part of a day was considered a day. So 3 days and 3 nights becomes almost an idiom for any part of that day is the day. So if Jesus, and because they count evening and morning, evening to morning is the day, it's very possible that it wasn't like how we would think of 3 24-hour days, especially if he dies on Friday and wakes up on Sunday.
Once again, I think this pitch is more apologetics harmonization than scholarship. As Wes said, in Jewish reckoning, any part of a day can be counted as a full day. Using this system, Friday evening, Jesus' crucifixion and burial, Saturday, the Sabbath, and early Sunday morning, the resurrection, are generally interpreted as 3 days. However, this explanation is at odds with Matthew 12:40, where Jesus refers to 3 days and 3 nights, a phrase that seems to demand a literal 72-hour period. The Roman system views days as complete 24-hour periods, making the Friday to Sunday timeline even more problematic. From Friday evening to early Sunday morning spans only about 36 to 40 hours, well short of 3 full days and nights. The Synoptic Gospels all describe Jesus rising on the 3rd day, but with notable differences in phrasing. Mark 8:31 refers to rising after 3 days, suggesting a longer period. As I mentioned, Matthew 12:40 explicitly mentions 3 days and 3 nights, contradicting the inclusive reckoning typically applied. Luke 24:21 records the disciples lamenting on Sunday, "It is now the 3rd day since these things happened." suggesting a literal reading of days that does not fit neatly with the Friday to Sunday tradition. John just makes things worse. In John 19:14, Jesus is crucified on the day of preparation for the Passover, which would imply a Thursday crucifixion, while still keeping the discovery of the empty tomb on a Sunday, the first day of the week, according to John 20, verse 1. Now, most scholars choose to accept that John just really wants to parallel Jesus with the Passover lamb, so he's recording theological reality over chronological reality. Or alternatively, that the synoptics really want a 3-day fulfillment of scriptural motifs, so they're recording theology over chronological reality. Either way, neither Jewish nor Roman timekeeping fully resolves the discrepancies without making even further assumptions and leaps.
Then 400 people saw him afterwards.
That's the claim that Paul makes.
Paul makes this.
Yeah.
And I got Joe Rogan thinking it's 400, not 500.
And how many different people have some sort of a recollection or a writing or something that's attributed to them of being witness to his resurrection?
We have Peter, Paul, Jude, James.
Paul, yes. He's our only written source in all of history who says in first person that they saw a risen Jesus of some form or another. I presume Wes is including Peter, Jude, and James because there are Bible books associated with those names. But surely Wes is aware that none of the authors of those letters, within those letters, say that they saw a resurrected Jesus. I don't even need to appeal to the high degree of doubt that those books were written by those men. The letters don't claim resurrection witness at all.
And Matthew, Mark, and Luke. The thing with Matthew, Mark, and Luke is that Matthew and John are attributed to direct disciples of Jesus.
Attributed to direct disciples or not, the first and fourth gospels do not use first-hand perspective at all, let alone for witnessing Jesus. It's not impossible that they wrote books about their own experiences entirely in third-hand perspective.
George likes spicy chicken.
What's that?
I like spicy chicken.
No. You said George likes spicy chicken.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did. You said George likes spicy chicken.
You're turning into Jimmy.
George is getting upset.
But that's not what you'd expect and isn't remotely definitive. The author of Matthew doesn't even use first person when describing the time Jesus met Matthew.
Luke and Mark are not. So they are not eyewitnesses within the Jesus community. In fact, Luke prefaces his gospel by saying that. He's right up front about this. He's like, hey, I'm not an eyewitness. Don't confuse me with an eyewitness.
Correct. And Mark was written first, with Luke and Matthew borrowing from it extensively. The author everyone borrowed from was not an eyewitness. To answer Joe's question in a scholarly way, there is only one account directly attributable to someone as a witness, just Paul.
The words that Luke uses at the beginning of his gospel, where he says, I'm interviewing eyewitnesses and I'm writing up an orderly account. And so he's saying, I'm going to use these methods that are expected as good history of my day. I'm not an eyewitness, so I'm going to try to find the people who are eyewitnesses.
Not really. The first verses of Luke read, many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us, just as they were handed down to us by those who from the first were eyewitnesses and servants of the word. This doesn't say the author sought out eyewitnesses. This says that the entire community received stories from people claiming to be eyewitnesses. From this passage, there's no reason at all to assume that the author met any of them. That's just wishful speculation.
So we have an account of the resurrection. Do we have an account of the denial of the resurrection? Is there an historical record of him just dying and this like a rebuttal rather to what they're saying?
It's possible that such a thing could have been written. So great question. If we had such a document, that would be a big deal. But of course, the absence of such a document is ultimately unsurprising, as the only reason we have any of the texts at all is because Christians chose to copy them like crazy.
The Christians were less discerning in their proliferation of written documents. So the Jews had this whole system where you had to be a trained scribe, and they were very, very careful with the procedures that you went through. Whereas the Christians were like, we want to get this thing out as fast as we can, as often as we can.
And those busy scribes likely wouldn't have spent resources copying a detrimental document. To be clear, I very much doubt a resurrection denial document was written, because again, what would that look like? I did not see Jesus rise from the dead. Signed, Bartholomew. How many of us wrote documents saying, I didn't see O.J. Simpson murder anyone? Few, because that's negative testimony. Negative testimony doesn't and shouldn't convince anyone. Even if they had the body of Jesus, after a few days, that thing is unrecognizable. No believing Christian is going to see a random 20-year-old corpse and say, oh, that's Jesus, all right. Guess I'm wrong.
No, the only ones from the ancient world that deny his resurrection are groups that come on afterwards that sometimes are described as Gnostics, and they're not necessarily just denying it for the reasons we might think they were. They're denying it because they have incorporated ideas of pagan philosophy, where they believe that the spiritual is good and the physical is bad. So if Jesus was crucified, let me back up. If Jesus is God, he cannot have a physical body. So they deny that he actually had a physicality to him.
Exactly. This is a culture that by and large was accepting of the spiritual realm and clearly accepted information from dreams and visions to be evidentiarily on par with anything they saw with their eyes. What convinces a first century person of a resurrection is entirely different than what would convince a modern person.
So we don't actually get like a concrete denial of his resurrection in that way until you get things like the Gospel of Barnabas in the Middle Ages, which is it's actually the document that Billy brought up to me in the conversation we had, is the evidence that Jesus was never crucified.
Well, you've got the Quran written in the 7th century that denies Jesus was crucified. So that's many centuries before the Gospel of Barnabas.
In the ancient world, nobody really had that big of a problem with these kind of supernatural claims.
Not much evidence would have been needed to convince a first century person because they didn't have a naturalistic philosophy.
The ancient world didn't really have a problem with supernatural events. There is an ancient writer who mocks Christianity, and he particularly mocks Christianity in saying that, of course, Jesus did miracles because Jesus had a childhood in Egypt. And he goes, all of those Egyptians are magicians anyways. So he just learned the magic when he was a child.
This is referring to Celsus, a late 2nd century Greek philosopher, in his book, The True Word, or On the True Doctrine.
So he actually confirms, incidentally, two things: that the narrative in the Gospels where it says that the Holy Family fled to Egypt during the reign of Herod, he corroborates that he actually thinks that happened, and that Jesus did miracles. He just attributes the miracles to Jesus being a traveling magician anyways. And
this was written around 175 AD. So the Gospels had been around about 100 years at this point. So Celsus could no more affirm that Jesus went to Egypt and performed miracles than James Gunn's new Superman film can affirm the 1930s comic depicting Clark Kent as leaping tall buildings in a single bound. That Celsus is accepting these points for the sake of his critique tells us nothing at all about their historicity.
You know, anybody who lived in Egypt knows some magic.
That is what's really fascinating, that the mindset of the people that lived back then was that whatever was going on in Egypt was so crazy that they had to be magicians.
You did get Joe excited about one of his favorite topics, so that was a good strategy.
Yeah, but everybody believed in supernatural events. Like, there's no such thing as like a secular work in the ancient world. Even Plutarch, who's one of the most famous biographers in the ancient world, he wrote 90 biographies, of which 60 still survive today. He was a priest of Apollo. So like, he's already assuming that the gods exist, that crazy things are going to happen in the world. And so they didn't have a problem with people doing miracles or crazy things happening.
Exactly. And historians are able to read the mundane claims made by Plutarch as of reasonable probability, and also the places in the same books where there are oracles, portents, nymphs, prophetic dreams, interference from gods, and men becoming actual gods. Those claims can be considered of low probability or straight non-historical. Historians do this for Plutarch, so there's no double standard at all when historians treat the Gospels the same way. Documents in the day felt free to mix reliable information with unreliable information. That's why no amount of demonstrating plausible name distribution should make me accept water turning to wine.
Well, that's also why it's so interesting trying to put your mind into the context of people that lived back then when you try to interpret what these stories were all about, because they did believe in things that weren't real. So when they talk about this thing that we're supposed to believe is real, when you have all this evidence that they believe things that aren't true.
Yeah.
It's interesting, right? Because like you're now saying, yeah, but this one really was true.
Right.
Well, there's so many different things that they thought of and believed that weren't true.
Yeah.
Well said, Joe. The special pleading fallacy occurs when someone applies standards, principles, or rules to others while exempting themselves or their argument without providing a valid justification for the exemption. I think you're right in suspecting that Christians are special pleading the miracles of Jesus.
The interesting thing about Jesus is that we have more evidence from different writings in the ancient world than we probably should have for someone of his stature. Because we have Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John, these 4 biographies. There's really only one other person in and around that time that can claim to have that much kind of independent testimony of their life.
It's a bit of a stretch to call Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John independent testimony when about 90% of Mark is found in Matthew and 65% of Mark is in Luke. And there's a surging opinion in the scholarship that the author of John also had access to Mark. It seems these books were more crafted and changed in response to each other. That's not exactly independent.
The problem with some of these other books is they appear to be almost completely reliant on the other books.
I'll grant that the books each have some unique details, but can we call these editions independent testimony? I guess I'll leave that judgment for you, the viewer.
What is the interpretation of Jesus from non-Jesus followers at the time? Like what did they think he was or who he was?
He was a crucified traveling rabbi.
Hey, that's what I think too. Look at me aligning with first century opinion.
You know, you have a number of these individuals, Cassio or Suetonius, but what they're doing mostly is describing what the followers of Christianity are saying about him. So you do have to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt in that they're not saying things that they believe happened. They're talking about things that Christians believe happened.
That's exactly the point I would have made, and you made it very well. And this was pretty much the end of the resurrection section of the discussion, so it's probably best if I leave it here on this point of agreement. Now, lest you think I'm creating some kind of artificial or arbitrary delineation between Scholar Wes and Apologist Wes, know that this seems to be his own chosen double life.
Tell everybody how to find you, how to find all of the different. You have 2 different YouTube channels. You have your own, and you have this new one. Apologetics Canada.
Yeah. So I work for a national not-for-profit. Yeah. So wesleyhuff.com is my website. apologeticscanada.com is where, if you want to see where I'm speaking or what we're up to. I'm part of a team that does a lot of this stuff.
In the end, both my praise and advice for Wes, not that he needs any from me, would mirror that of his friend Kip.
First of all, well done. I mean, for the most part, in calling out a grifter like Billy Carson on his bullshit. It was a pleasure.
Yeah.
It was a delight to watch someone who's got training take on a pseudo historian like that, because it gets frustrating to see the ways in which history and literature and scholarship are manipulated to these sorts of ends. But I think on that point as well, I hope you hear my critique of some of your response here, and I hope you take it to heart. I think you, at a minimum, I think you could have done better to provide some added nuance in a few places.
If you'd ever be open to a friendly conversation about the resurrection or gospel authorship or any of those kind of topics, I think that would be amazing.
All right, peace and love to everybody out there. Shout out to my brother Sean in the building. He said, "My father is my deity. I always think of him, Karen, whenever I hold him in high regard and praise him, or when I need him, I call out to him. But in reality, he's serving me my purpose. That he's serving my purpose that way." And the truth of the matter is, I always tell people that my God, the only God I know, is my parents, my mother and my father. You see, people don't realize that their belief system has engulfed them so much personally that the rationale has gone from your mindset. Whether you believe you're a Buddhist, and this is why I showed it at the beginning of the show. Buddhists feel that they have the right information. Hare Krishna is coming to do whatever and is a guide for the Hindus. Buddhists have Buddha. You know, different people have different things that they create within their mindset under the political culture that they grew up in. Because we did not have an option outside of the Bible. First, they didn't want us to read the Bible here in the West. Remember that. They didn't want black folks or the slaves to read the Bible because the Bible is to free you. So they think that we were pagans. The only way we could be saved is if we accepted the religion. But when we accepted the religion, we remix it with African spiritual systems. We remix it to the way to our favoritism, our inclination to bring out something positive for us. So we started putting ourselves in the stories. So we started calling Harriet Tubman the Moses or the Black Moses or whatever. The fact of the matter is we use the Bible for that, but it was never our book here in the West. Let's be clear about that in my Jabari voice. Let's be clear, family. The Bible was never our book. It was never. It was the quote unquote slave master or the white man's book that he used to justify enslaving us because we were considered pagans. That's all it is. It was never our book. What we did is take the book and created our own church system. African Methodist Church, African Baptist Church, African this. Then we became the black this, black that, African Pentecostal, black Pentecostal, black this, black that. This is what we did. We took a religion and created our own out of it. Now you have my brothers, Hebrew Israelites. They created their own doctrine out of the same book that was used to justify us being enslaved. It's crazy. And then they're both arguing who is right, the black church and the Hebrew Israelites. None of y'all ain't right. It ain't y'all book in the beginning. Maybe that's why we haven't got the blessing that we think we deserve. Just saying. It's not our book. It never was. And then when we disagree, you an atheist. No, I don't identify with your definitions of words. I don't identify with what you want to characterize me. I always say call me an agnostic, but I mean, I'm just a free thinker. I don't bow down to what you give me. I don't bow down to the state religion. So I am an atheist technically, just like how Christians were called atheists back in the days. If you read Justin Martyr, I think, or one of them church fathers, he talks about it. Get out of here, man. I choose not to be a part of that. Listen, this is why none of these guys would take on a debate. It's the white man's religion. You, as a descendant of being a kidnapped victim, have the right to call it the white man's religion. And that's what those guys, when they were debating Damon Richardson and the other brilliant brother, Jerome Gay, shout out to him, by the way, brilliant brother. They didn't have what it takes to challenge them to say why it's the white man's religion. They didn't have the scholarship to back it up. Well, let them ask Garfield that. I'll tell you, we got that religion from white folks. We were not culturally attached to that culture. We are West and Central Africans, and I could prove it. I could prove it easily. All right. I was getting a little bit too emotional. Sorry for that. All right. And like in science, don't do anything, Rex. We all go to the doctor and we deal with blood work, and we have a headache. We're gonna have a baby. Where do you go to? You go to the doctor, the hospital. Let's not do that. That is craziness. But anyway, let me move on the show let me get to Tariq going in on what do you call it? Umar.
This guy had citizenship. So if several people are getting citizenship.
What's good, everybody? It's your boy, O'Shea Duke Jackson, back at it again with another episode of The Celebrity Jump. Dima, come on, music. It's 2025, and a lot of African countries are looking for African Americans to come in to invest. And one of those countries is Ghana. And they started something around 2018, 2019, if I'm not mistaken. It was called the Year of Return. And the Year of Return was to invite the African diaspora to come back to the motherland. And this was a great marketing strategy. a lot of African Americans, or what you would now consider hashtag FBA, felt that this was a call for them to actually be free in their land of where maybe some of their ancestors came from. But unfortunately, it was a disaster for many who went. A lot of African Americans found life in Ghana to be very difficult. A lot of people got scammed. A lot of people lost their money. And there was not a lot of assistance from the Ghanaian government, who was asking them to come out and resettle. And that's interesting because there's another scammer that was also in America at the same time, failing to build a school. His name is Dr. Umar Johnson. Now, Dr. Umar Johnson is an interesting case, as we all know. And basically, Dr. Umar Johnson is the most unaccountable person on the internet. He still hasn't built his school. He still hasn't been accountable, and he's still lying. So then, what is the relationship between Ghana and Dr. Umar Johnson? Well, now Dr. Umar Johnson has received citizenship. And that's very interesting because a country who's known for not doing things right with its money and mismanaging its economy, partnering up with Dr. Umar Johnson, who's known for doing the same, seems to be a match made in heaven.
Stop the cap.
And this has gotten the attention of Tariq Nasheed. As we know, Tariq Nasheed and Dr. Umar Johnson are not on the best terms, but again, it's not a whole lot of beef at this point. But Tariq Nasheed did realize that Dr. Umar Johnson got citizenship. He said this.
From my perspective, it looks like they're trying to get some money. This looks like a little money grab because from what I understand, Ghana is in debt to China. And China is like shaking them pockets like, hey, where's my bread? So there's like, hey, my FBA, come home to Mother Africa. It's like, okay.
Got him! He said, yeah, this seems like a money grab. And I believe that he's right. Remember, I live on the continent of Africa. There's been times where I've interacted with at least one African government and many travel agencies to do this quote unquote year of return to the continent or to the country that I'm in, which is Uganda. And so far, I've always said no. I don't think that there needs to be a year of return of scams. But this is something that Dr. Umar Johnson does. Dr. Umar Johnson does sell tours going back to Africa. And the thing is that because Ghana might be having a tough time in its economy, well, a guy like Dr. Umar Johnson is an influencer. So Dr. Umar Johnson can direct African Americans or his base to either go resettle in Ghana or to visit Ghana, which adds up to a lot of money for the country of Ghana. Let's go back to Tariq Nasheed. To be fair, Tariq Nasheed is not against African Americans going to Africa.
And yeah, if y'all want to rock over there, hey, knock yourself out. Knock yourself out. And me, right now, I'm focused on really getting our stuff together here. Yeah, we got some debts that's owed here, where we're getting everything solidified and structured here. And look, I'm down for trade. I love doing international business. That's why I don't mind people going over there. Go over there to Ghana and start setting up something where we can trade.
He says, hey, listen, if some of you brothers that want to go to Africa, go there, set up some things and get some trade going. But a brother by the name of Great Black Shark came on to Tariq Nasheed's particular Twitter space and said this.
Go ahead.
I agree with that as well, as far as our brothers and sisters of foundational Black American freedmen lineage going to wherever nation offers us an open hand for like dual citizenship or what have you, because this is going to expose something for everybody to see, especially when the more well-known people go over there. Like you said, we need to start opening up mutual relationships where we help each other business-wise, and it will be nice to see some of these nations actually speak up about what's going on over here with the likes of Sonia Massey, Robert, because they see these things. And I say that it's only fair that they do this because we've had a historical track record for speaking up for many people around the world when they've been grievously harmed by white supremacy or any issue. So it's time for them to reciprocate that. And if they don't, it's going to be seen on the world stage, because the only thing I would ask of people like the brother Umar is, if you try to do that, and you see that they don't want to reciprocate that, then be honest and tell the truth.
Yes.
We have to enter into this new era. If we're going to have any kind of unity with people outside of our lineage, it can't be built on falsehood. It can't be built on selfishness. It's got to be built on mutual reciprocation and truth.
He says, listen, we've been speaking up for certain things for people in Africa, but when it's the other way around, you don't really get that, and it seems like, hey, we're looking for a relationship with them, but they don't want to have a transparent relationship with us. And if they're not going to speak up for the things that happen with us in America, then what they need to do is basically be honest about it. Dr. Umar, be honest about it. And of course, you will hear, Ghana mentioning the George Floyd situation, but only as a mechanism for you to come back and invest in Ghana. So, hey, you don't have to worry about the George Floyd situation coming here. Bring your money and invest in Ghana. And then there's another brother who also invested in Ghana.
I just want to be real brief. I actually live in Ghana. The citizenship thing is all going through the African American Association of Ghana. So if you're not a member of that, you don't know somebody in that, you can't get somebody into to push you in, they're not getting that citizenship. I've been trying to get mine. I've been there 12 years. They'll tell you need to have a visa for like 10. After that 10, they just keep renewing your visa so they can get that money.
Now, this guy said he was in Ghana for 10 years. And typically, for a lot of the brothers out there that go to Ghana, or like myself in Uganda, there's a lot of things that you must do before you're eligible for citizenship. Like, I've been here for I don't know how many years, having a work permit. You got to renew that work permit. So there's a lot of stuff that you need to do in order to qualify for citizenship. Now, this guy has been there for almost 12 years, and the African American Association is telling him that he can't do it. And when he goes to, the immigration office, it's a problem. But Dr. Umar Johnson, who doesn't spend any money in Africa, who doesn't spend any money in Ghana, who's not there paying anybody, because Dr. Umar Johnson is a scammer. He don't pay anybody. He don't do anything for anyone. He automatically gets citizenship. Meanwhile, you have brothers and sisters that come from the States that get work permits. They're in Ghana. They're spending money in Ghana. They're helping develop Ghana. And then they're taking like 10 or 12 years to get their citizenship. But Dr. Umar Johnson, who's rusty, dusty, crusty, and musty, can come right along, who is also a scammer, and get citizenship right away. And remember, Dr. Umar Johnson is really known for a lot of these scams.
Umar is full of excuses too. He blames GoFundMe for removing his account, but it appears this may have been due to his lack of non-profit status that he says he was in the process of applying for. The exact amount of donations he's received is tough to gauge. It's not hard to believe that he's raised several $1 million in the past decade. And much like that friend who never pays you back, for every delay, he's got another excuse. First, it's not enough donations, then real estate issues, then licensing issues, then HVAC, then not enough community commitment, and the list goes on.
Remember, Dr. Umar Johnson is known for raising hundreds of thousands of dollars on GoFundMe, and he said that he lost his money, but he also lost his accreditation as a nonprofit. And whenever he loses his accreditation as a nonprofit, he blames other people. Now, this is interesting because Dr. Umar Johnson was given citizenship, and by now you would have thought that, hey, the country of Ghana would have taken that seriously. Like, yo, we don't want to give citizenship to a guy who's known for defrauding his own people and not taking any accountability. But no, he gets it anyway. And so this happens with Dr. Umar Johnson.
Yes, I am aware that there are Neanderthals on YouTube. Neanderthal struggle streamers are now starting to give commentary on the Prince of Pan-Africans. Caucasian YouTubian struggle streamers are now starting to include me in their content. And some Negropean YouTubian struggle streamers are now linking up with the Caucasian struggle streamers to try to stop the mission and the ministry and the movement of Ifa today. And all I can say to them is good luck with that, because you are messing with a chosen one.
Got him! So now Dr. Umar Johnson wants to insult this guy people who are making videos about him. And to be honest, what Tariq Nasheed is saying is like, basically, if this is the country in Africa that's looking to give Dr. Umar Johnson citizenship, well, we already know what it's about. It's a money grab. It's like, come bring all your money from the African American community and invest it in Ghana. Now, to be fair, I have certain people that I know that are Ghanaian. I don't have problems with Ghanaians at all. But since Ghana put themselves out there as the trendsetter of welcoming the diaspora home, then they are open to criticism. And the one thing that I would tell about Ghana or any country who's offering this is, what does citizenship really look like? What does it entail? I believe Tariq also answered that question. And it's something that Dr. Umar Johnson should be able to express to his audience, but we all know it's a money grab. I personally believe that Dr. Umar Johnson didn't go to Ghana on his own dime. Dr. Umar Johnson don't have his own dime. I believe that he was paid as an influencer to get citizenship in Ghana. Dr. Umar Johnson doesn't do any business in Ghana, and he will be paid to bring other people to Ghana to do what? To actually fail in Ghana. And when you start hearing about the hashtag FBA and some of their principles of what they're talking about, it's like, as much as you might not want to hear it as a Pan-African, when you see something like this, it's hard to defend. And it's like, yo, Dr. Umar Johnson is just out there with the scams, and now he has an African country behind him who wants to help him pull it off. And he wasn't really being disrespectful, but he did point it out that, hey, these countries are going to use African-American influencers or hashtag FBA influencers to pretty much trick people to go to Ghana and to possibly fail. This is not everybody, though. I mean, obviously, I understand you have some people in Ghana that do very well, and there is association, so they do have some infrastructure there. I'm not denying that. But the reality is, if Dr. Umar Johnson got citizenship there for doing nothing, then why are you making every other African American go over to Ghana and prove themselves for 10 years when they have to spend their money and Dr. Umar Johnson scams money from the people you're inviting over to Ghana? It's a bad look. So, guys, what do you think? It's your boy, O'Shea Duke Jackson, back at it again with another episode of The Celebrity.
I don't know if anybody wants to come on and have a discussion about this. But I will say this. I'm going to say this. Of course, he gave his own opinion and all that stuff. And I'm going to do the Charleston White, and I'm going to do Fat Joe, African Bambaataa. I don't even rock with African Bambaataa, but he went in about hip-hop. He's a part of the history. I'm gonna play that next week, and I'm also gonna deal with Lord Jamar. Is it time to cancel Lord Jamar? Let me tell y'all something right now. When you have something called the actual fact, whether you're part of the Nation of Islam or you're part of what was called the 5% Nation of Islam, there's a question that they ask: who is the original man? The original man is the black man, the maker, the owner. I'm sorry, the Asiatic black man, the maker, the owner, the cream of the planet, earth god of the universe. Another question that they have is, what is the circumference of the earth? The circumference of the earth is 196,940,000 square miles. Lord Jamar is a part of the gods on earth, as far as I know, and he follows the teachings. So if Master Farad Muhammad asks the question, what is the circumference of the earth? That is already telling you that the earth is in some circular form or format. So when people are debating Lord Jamar, just go to his teachings. That's all you got to go through. Hey, Amir, how you doing? I'm on the show, Pops. I'm doing my show. I'll call you back. So Lord Jamar, I'll deal with that next week. I saw Sister Dr. Mayat and Aunt did a show, and they really pointed out how silly he looked on the show with Dave, Dr. Dave. He looked so silly. And these people they're not only representing their stance, they're representing how black folks are seen in other communities. We're seen as somebody who's our scientific illiterate. The dude asked him what is down? What is the y'all? I'm gonna play it next week, man. This Lord Jamar stuff is just silly at this point. The flat earth thing is crazy. All you gotta do is just ask him where the eclipse come from. Just ask about the eclipse. That's it. There's no need to have. In third grade, we did science projects about the eclipse. Third grade in Jamaica, third grade here in America, third grade in Europe, third grade all over the world. So you're telling me he never took that science class at third grade when you were teaching us about the eclipse and how it came to be and why is it the way it is? It's way far than embarrassing at this point. Way far. And Godfrey was being very nice to his friend Lord Jamar. And then what they do is they pull the white card. Oh, you're gonna listen to this white guy? You know, they're part of the whole movement of trying to lie to us about information. So why should we listen to this guy? Let me tell you something, man. Lord Jamar, you get sick tomorrow, you run into the hospital, and you're gonna deal with the same doctors that you talk against on your podcast. This is what YouTube. This is the bad side of YouTube. Anyone could come on and make a channel. This is why I'm very balanced with my approach. I don't believe in Christianity. I don't believe if you accept Jesus Christ as the Lord and Savior, but I understand why they believe it. I don't believe what the Hebrew. I think the Hebrew Israelite movement is one of the most ignorant movements. I'm not disrespecting them. I think they are so ignorant to the truth that it's ridiculous. But they're piggybacking on Christians who also don't have the ultimate truth. So everybody in their own belief system, I have the ultimate truth. I don't have the ultimate truth. I would never say that. I said I've done research on this and I could talk about this, but I'm telling you, everything that you believe and you believe it in your whole heart is wrong if it's based off of just the biblical text. Because the biblical text is rigged. You got a bunch of contradictions. You got historical things that they got wrong. You got contradictions by the same writer, Luke. You got, come on, they don't even know when Jesus was born. The writers don't even get it right. I'm just saying, if that's your favorite game that you like to play, play it. But don't expect everybody else to accept the game that you're playing. Listen. Some people are into African spirituality and they think they're the shit. Oh, I follow because this. Because I come from the continent of Africa, I'm gonna support you and your foolishness too. Like it's the end all be all. I never hear you go off. You talk about the African God. I grew up in America. I grew up in the West. I grew up in Jamaica, which is the most Christianized country in the entire world. Most churches per square mile, according to the Guinness Book of Records. Ain't no more country more Christian than Jamaica. And it's one of the most wickedest places in the world. And it's one of the most Christianized places in the world. Do the math. I just showed you 100 and how much people die? 170,000 people die daily. I'm telling you, how is it possible we're living in a world where we say God is the author of all things and 170,000 people are dying daily? Anyway, let me get to there's a video out about this guy here. What's his name? Skip Bayless. For those who don't know Skip Bayless, you know who Stephen A. Smith is. They have a show called First Take. He used to be on First Take. They used to go back and forth with Stephen A. Then he moved on to Fox. Thought the show was going to end. Stephen A. came back, revived the show, and is the man at ESPN. All right. Let's look at this video right here about Skip Bayless. Let's get it.
Guys, the internet has tried to warn you for years. Please stop dating coworkers. It's a lesson for women, but it's also a lesson for men. I understand you work there all day long. You see your coworkers more than you see your own family and friends. But that is not an excuse for you to date the ladies at your job because of many reasons.
Do not sleep with your coworkers. A cheap thrill and a night to remember that more than likely you'll both regret, especially once the whole office starts talking about it. You know, there is an app there called Tinder.
And then there are people that have their own experiences with this.
Now you listen to me and you listen to me good. Don't get your money and your honey in the same place. Don't be out here dating a coworker. Don't be out here sleeping with a coworker. I'm telling you right now from experience, it ain't worth it. Because it's all well and fine when it's all well and fine. But when it ain't, it damn sure ain't.
I don't know how I feel about it. Because if you're a single man and you're a single woman, I don't see if you date a coworker if it's a problem. I think the issue comes when you're a supervisor and the person is a non-supervisor. I think that's where the problem is. But if you're all on the same level, it shouldn't be a problem.
It's like, what if y'all are arguing at home and it spill over at work? Y'all get into it at work. Now both y'all fired.
But then even worse things can happen for just saying hello.
Stop trying to date or hook up with your coworker. You're making a big mistake, and let me explain why. One of my coaching clients just told me the other day that he was at work and he walked into the break room and he saw that there was a new girl who was there and he introduced himself. By no means was he being flirty. By no means was he doing anything inappropriate. He was just being nice and introduced himself, only to find that he was reported the next day to HR for being inappropriate. He was completely mind blown.
Nothing good comes out of dating women that work with you, but some guys want to have their cake and eat it too. Let's talk about legendary sports commentator and journalist Skip Bayless. He is the guy that is a legend in the field, just like Stephen A. Smith. He's the one that gave Shannon Sharpe his rise to fame, and he's a legend in sports writing and also in sports commentating. But stop the show. There are some horrible allegations against him right now. Now, the allegations are against him and Fox Sports executive Charlie Dixon. And that's coming from a lady by the name of Nushan Faraji. Now, Nushan Faraji is a hairstylist. So before the people get ready for, their shows and things like that, she's the one that's basically doing hair and, just kind of fixing people up, both male and female. She started working there in 2012. And the head of content, Mr. Charlie Dixon, allegedly grabbed her behind at a birthday party in West Hollywood.
Damn!
She went to report it to Fox, and somebody told her allegedly to get over it. But wait, it got worse. Skip Bayless was really fond of Nushan Faraji. Yeah, so when he would get close to her, he would give her lingering hugs and kisses on the cheek while putting his body against hers and pressing against her breast. Now, Skip Bayless is one of those old guys who still works out, so he thinks he's still in shape. But you know what? She wasn't interested. She said, listen, I don't want to date at work. And to get away from Skip Bayless, she would even lie and say things like she was suffering from ovarian cancer in order to halt his advances. But that didn't stop Skip Bayless. He really wanted to clap those cheeks. Booty clapping sounds! He said this, listen, baby, I will give you $1.5 million to basically let me get those cheeks. And I will change your life. But then she said, hell no, I'm not gonna let you get these cheeks. Then Skip Bayless got mad. Then he accused her of something crazy. You know what? You let Shannon Sharpe clap your cheeks. Why you not letting me clap your cheeks? So damn. That might have been the reason why Skip Bayless came at Shannon Sharpe, because Shannon Sharpe took his chick. But then it gets worse. Approximately 1 week later, Miss Bayless made another advance. And she was like, Skip, don't you have a wife? And he was like, aren't you Muslim? Doesn't your dad have 3 to 4 wives? Now, basically, this is insulting on a personal and professional level. And she also was saying how much Mr. Skip Bayless was mispronouncing her name, like I'm probably doing right now. Stop the show. Please don't sue me. All right. I just really don't know. But then she started dropping some more receipts. You see, she wants to paint the picture that Fox Sports 1 is corrupt. And this sort of behavior amongst employees of sexual harassment and sleeping around is something that the organization knows about, but does nothing about. And she's going to try to prove her point basically against Mrs. Joy Taylor, or I should say Miss Joy Taylor, because she's technically not married. And what she's trying to say is Miss Taylor is basically using her sexuality, or she has used her sexuality against Mr. Dixon, the executive of Fox Sports 1 that grabbed her ass at that particular birthday party, that while she refuses to do it, Miss Faraji, while she won't sleep around, Miss Taylor or Miss Joy Taylor will sleep around, and she will let anybody clap her cheeks to get ahead in Fox. If you look at Mr. Emmanuel Acho, he basically tries to pretend to be a very clean-cut guy, like very pristine, very immaculate English. He tries to be too perfect. And he acts like Joy Taylor is his homie.
Just got done with rehearsal for the new show Speak, and I got to take a moment to shout out my co-host Joy Taylor. A woman, a black woman, daily show, sports. Do you all realize how hard it is to get into the position that she is in? So often there's misogyny and sexism running rampant in sports, and we don't even care what women have to say in sports. But Joy is not only in the position on television as a woman, as a black woman, but as an opinionist. So not just asking men what they think, but providing her own unique and distinct insight. It's hard to do, and Joy, you have done it. So congratulations. Looking forward to working with you, and hope y'all tune in 4:30 to 6 Eastern every day starting next week.
He does everything to make it seem as if him and Joy Hall are just really good friends. And then also, even on her birthday, he has posts like this. This is January 17, 2023. Happy birthday to my brilliant co-host, my homie, and my friend, Joy Taylor Talks. It's a pleasure and honor to work with you daily. Y'all go show her some love. Right? This is the same guy that's like, oh, she's a strong black woman and all of this. And then here's a shocking photo of them together, as it seems like at her house, hanging out. He ain't got on no socks or shoes on. She's drinking some wine. He got that fake ass dusty smile. And the person that posted it says, people shocked about Joy Taylor and Acho like they wasn't at the crib together. Now, this is interesting. Let's get into what's in this affidavit. Storytime music! In approximately February 2020, Miss Taylor asked Miss Faraji to meet her for lunch in Beverly Hills. When she arrived, she found Miss Taylor with a man, Mr. Emmanuel Acho. Miss Faraji did not know Mr. Acho, but could tell that the two were romantically involved. Now, stop the show. Some of y'all be at work clapping each other cheeks and you think that somebody is stupid. We know that y'all are smashing, okay? So, a few months after meeting Mr. Acho at the lunch, Miss Faraji noticed him in the hallway while at work. Miss Faraji later asked Miss Taylor if Mr. Acho also worked at Fox. Miss Taylor, Joy Taylor, confirmed and explained that she wanted Mr. Acho to eventually recommend her on the show Speak for Yourself. Now, Miss Faraji became alarmed and warned Miss Taylor that she should probably not sleep with Mr. Dixon and Mr. Acho at the same time, because Mr. Dixon is a very powerful man that may become very angry. Stop the show. So listen, you shouldn't be sleeping with these two dudes, all right? So you're sleeping with Acho so that you can basically get another show. And then you're sleeping with Mr. Dixon so you can get another show. But Taylor said, don't worry about it. She explained that she was also now powerful, and once Mr. Dixon was no longer useful to her, she would follow through on her plan to tell the company that he forced himself on her. Can I get a, oh my God, sound effect?
Oh my God!
She would not allow herself to be forced out by Mr. Dixon like other women talent. So what happened after that? In approximately September 2022, Miss Taylor started to work on Speak. Miss Taylor requests Miss Faraji to do her hair. Got him! That's crazy. But we should have saw this coming, because you know what? Joy Taylor kind of admitted that she would pretty do certain things for money to get ahead. And I'm not saying this. This is what she said herself.
These hypotheticals have got us in a chokehold, and we must free ourselves. It's fun to argue about. It's fun to talk about what you would do in this scenario, or would you leave the game if the seats were high, or if a man took you this place on a first date, what you would do. And I'm telling you, like, every interaction that I have with people now, in some way or another, these things come up. Can we just keep it a buck? If they're fine enough, if they're funny enough, or if their financial status is what you want, fine, funny, money. You're throwing all boundaries, standards, all that you talked on Instagram about how you would never, and this woman ain't kid, because women this and men this, you're moving forward with this person.
No, you know, my
favorite hypothetical, because it's so ridiculous, is when you ask anybody if they would do something outrageous for like $1 million and they say no. It's like, okay, would you do it for 2 million? I mean, would you do it for what's the number? Like anytime you add money into a hypothetical, people love feeling good about themselves by saying that they wouldn't do it for the money, but it's literally only because it's a hypothetical. If you saw this $1 million in front of your face and I said, do this, are you doing it? So I don't even know if hypotheticals are real indicators of the situation that's being discussed, because I'm starting to think people only use hypotheticals to lie about the circumstance.
Damn. All I gotta say is damn. That's crazy. She's basically admitted that, look, yeah, I would do something strange for a little change, just like anybody else would. People, if they won't do that, they are lying. And you know what? They are lying. This is not uncommon, guys, especially in the industries of entertainment, in music, which is in entertainment.
So let me ask y'all a question. I don't mind going on Homeboy's channel, man. He makes a lot of videos that make sense. I just wanted to talk about the fact that how we look at it from a white perspective and from a black perspective. And if this was somebody black, how would you have responded? Somebody white, how would you have responded? I think we got to be careful when we're at work, man. Yo, you be working with some pretty fine woman, man. I've been there, man. I've been there. Oh, man, if I would tell y'all the stories, man. I tell you, boy. But anyway, it is what it is. But before I go, I want to touch on something with the Israelites and the Christians, and something that a lot of Israelites hold to. There's a brother by the name of Katazar from ISUPK. He did a 12-tribe chart thing. And I basically, hold on, where is it at? Where is it at? I can't find it. Where is it at? Here we go. Yeah, it's right here. I don't know why I can't see it. Let me get it over here. Okay, good. I want y'all to see this story for days with this job stuff. I made tons of mistakes, but hey, it's the past. It's the past. It's the past. That's all I gotta say. It's the past. All right. So let's take a look at this right here. Oh man. Come on, Bills. Y'all start badly today, man. Come on, Bills. All right, so here we go. I'm going to share the screen, and we're going to get into it. Let me see. I can't share this. See the Chrome tab. Why is it I can't share this? All right, so this is what I'm going to do. Cancel. Let me see if I could bring this up. Let me close this out. Keynote. Files. Open recent. Sign is dead. All right, let me see if I could bring this up and share the screen. If I could share the screen, be good to go. I don't know, family. Blurred out. Is that the... All right. For some reason, I'm unable to share it. I don't know why. I have no idea why, but I would love to share it with the family. Hold on a second. Recent. Okay. Invalid file type. Oh man. Why is it I can't share the screen? This is bad. This is bad, man. This is bad. Hold on, let me try one more time. Let me close this. Let me close this. Let me close this. All right, in the meantime, if anybody wants to jump on, the link is at the top. I am trying to share. Profound Perspectives piece. I'm trying to I don't know, man. I can't share my slides. I don't know why. I really don't know why. I really don't know why. I don't know why. This is sad. I was going to talk about Deuteronomy 28 and okay, so here we go. Let's see if I could present it now. Share screen. Here we go. Here we go, family. Let me know if you guys could hear this, okay? Let me know if you could hear this. The Almighty is blocking you. Facts. Facts.
Out, blurred out, is that the North American Indians went into slavery with ships. Starting with the Taino Indians, the Mexican Indians, the Gadites, so-called North American Indians. And I'm going to get up for this lecture. Right. And you better find it out today. So this is Deuteronomy 28. Y'all know this. Next slide. So now this is a book right here that the blood stay pure.
Okay. All right. He mentioned North American Indians, Tainos in particular, going on ships as a fulfillment of Deuteronomy 28:68. ISUPK, let's just be clear, interprets Egypt as modern-day America or the Western Hemisphere. Tainos who were shipped to other parts of the Caribbean were already in spiritual Egypt. Those taken to Spain would not fulfill this, as spiritual Egypt is considered the Americas. The places listed here that natives were shipped to would not be a fulfillment of Deuteronomy 28:68, since Barbados, Jamaica, and Bermuda is already in spiritual Egypt according to ISUPK doctrine. Iberia and North Africa is not Egypt. The places listed here that natives were shipped to would not be a fulfillment of Deuteronomy 28:68. Spanish settlers enslaved the Taíno of Hispaniola. Spain is Europe, not America, aka spiritual Egypt. The Caribbean would have to be considered Egypt already. He tries to correlate split of North and Southern Kingdom with natives, offers nothing but his doctrinal opinion as proof. Various peoples rumored to be lost tribes do their claims prove that they are Israel? Japanese, Pashtuns, Aboriginal Australians, Native Americans, New Zealand, Indians, Burmese, African tribes. Japanese were rumored to have been Jews. Chapter 10, our own people of Jacob's seed, Japan. The spread of the fantasy of Israelite origin forms a consistent feature of the Western colonial enterprise. It is in fact in Japan that we can trace the most remarkable evolution in the Pacific of an imagined Judaic path. As elsewhere in the world, the theory that aspects of the country were to be explained via an Israelite model was introduced by Western agents. A remarkably short period, a host of nations were advanced by the Japanese themselves, claiming that they had a direct common ancestry with Jews, or at the very least, they were links between them. Now, Japanese Jewish theory. Did you know that one of the claims the Israelites used for Deuteronomy 28:68 is that they were taken on ships? What is this on the screen? The Portuguese World Heritage, Portuguese colonialism and Japanese slaves by Michio Kitahara. I want to make it clear to everybody. Before long, Japanese slaves were being brought and sold not only through Asia, but as far afield as Portugal and Argentina. Some slaves were captives in Japan's eternal civil war, sold by their Japanese captors to Portuguese traders. Others sold themselves or their children enslaved to escape crush. This sounds just like West and Central Africans. Look at this. Not so Toyotomi Hideyoshi. He was Japanese supreme warlord at the end of the 16th century. This is unbearable to me. He said in 1587, upon learning from one of his officials that the Portuguese buy hundreds of Japanese men and women. Their hands and feet are chained and they are driven into the bottom of the ships. This is far beyond the punishment in hell. Come on, family. Let's get it. Hold on. Let me get it right here. So now you could go to the samurai invasion of Korea, 1592 to 98. Korean captives taken to Japan. Japan is an island nation. Its prisoners were shipped from Korea as well as their pottery. Does this make these Koreans Israelites based off of them being taken on ships? What about the Asian slaves shipped to Mexico, aka spiritual Israel? From the book Asian Slaves in Colonial Mexico, from Chinos to Indians. Oh man, are those people slaves? Oh man.
This is why the oldest 10 commandments is found where? Anybody know? Not you, Ken. What's up? New Mexico. Get a brother hand. You know what I'm saying? It was found in New Mexico, the Los Lunes stone. That's not the only place that they were found, because we came here with the intent of serving our power. And they entered into the Euphrates at the narrow passage of the river. The narrowest part. The narrowest part.
All right. I'm going to cut it there. But I'm going to do this full presentation over, seeing that I don't think it's on Sonnetters anymore. So I'm going to show it. But I'm going to say to everybody, man, we're not Asiatics. We are West. We are primarily West and Central Africans. If you don't believe that, that's up to you and your belief, what your belief provides. What I'm going to do for everybody here is that I'm going to continue to do the research. I still question my brothers. I still feel that we're living a lie. It's not to disrespect anybody. Just like Christianity, I don't think Christianity belongs to West and Central Africans. That's just not our belief system. That's not us. We got to do better. You know, I understand we want to be a part of something because we grew up in the Bible culture. We think the Bible belongs to us or is a part of us. So we will find every unique perspective to say, hey, it's us, when it's not really us. Hey, this happened to us. It's not happened to anybody else in the world. That is complete garbage. Let's stop the nonsense and get over it. All right. But again, if anybody wants to jump on and prove on and say that they're this and bring new information to the field, I'm all ears. I'm all open. You have some good brothers out there that study, man. You got my brothers from ABT, Dre and Trilla. You got my brother Yoshi in Clubhouse. You got the brother from Genesis now. The two brothers, Hassad and brother Deacon Haka. Well, he's priest Haka now. You got some other brothers that do some good studying out there. I mean, Yawasap does a little something. Joel and some others. But the problem is methodology. Have you tried to falsify what you believe in? Have you put it through a process to come to a conclusion? Have you looked at all sides of the conversation? You got to try the falsification process. All right. Well, anyway, family, I'm out of here. I want to say peace and love. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. And I'm here. Peace.